Chapter 402. Mr. Wallen, I know I was wrong. We were just trying to get some money to spend. Please be magnanimous, I beg of you. Listening to Billy Wallen's words, the man's tears, snot, and his own blood were all over his face. I'm not a cold-blooded person. I don't care if you sell things to make a living, but you hit my men and dared to make a fuss. That's your fault. Now let's see your sincerity. Billy Wallen stood up with a smile and looked at the man in front of him with disdain. This guy wanted to survive in Boston, yet he dared to provoke Billy Wallen. He was courting death. Billy Wallen took out a dagger from one of his men behind him and threw it in front of the man. The man looked at the dagger. He knew what Billy Wallen meant. Billy Wallen wanted to see his sincerity. It seemed like he would not be able to keep one of his hands today, but he really could not bear to give up one of his hands just like that. He trembled as he picked up the dagger. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Mr. Wallen, I think it's better for you to die instead of me. Looking at his own face reflected in the dagger, the man shouted and jumped up from the ground in an instant. He stabbed the dagger at Billy Wallen's chest. Billy Warren smiled as he gently took a step back. Just as he was about to continue, a pair of huge hands stretched out from Billy Warren's side. Without saying a word, one hand grabbed his wrist while the other hand grabbed his shoulder. In an instant, the two hands exerted force, causing a cracking sound to be heard as the man's arm was pulled outwards. Yes, it was bent directly. Feeling the sharp pain from his arm, the man could not help but scream. Unfortunately, his screams didn't bring him any mercy. The big guy who broke his hand just now let him go and retreated. Billy Wallen's other subordinates quickly rushed over and gave him a round of punches and kicks. In less than 10 seconds, this person had already breathed out more than he breathed in. He lay on the ground, rolled his eyes, and looked helplessly at the sky. In this world, people like them really couldn't survive. Get rid of him. Looking at the man's appearance, Billy Wallen smiled disdainfully, turned around and walked out of the alley. His underlings grabbed the man at this time and put him in a car that had already been parked at a certain port. They poured him a lot of alcohol, pressed the accelerator, and the car rushed toward the sea crazily. It was foreseeable that even if this man was discovered in the future, he would not be able to get away with it. It was not that the Boston police were good for nothings, but because in this world, how many people would care about the life and death of an underling who sold flour? Since they had embarked on this path, their ending had already been decided. On the other side, Billy Wallen sat in a car and returned to his gathering place. But when he returned to his gathering place, he found that a group of people had been waiting for him for a long time. Looking at these people, Billy Wallen couldn't help but curse, because these people were none other than the people who repeatedly asked him to kill Jiang Hai. But he didn't want to kill Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai is a rich man, and he seems to have a lot of real power in Winthrop. Although he now has thousands of underlings, if he confronts the police head-on for Jiang Hai, he will definitely die in the end. After all, this is a legal society, not the time when the Gray Gang controlled the United States decades ago. Once the matter gets out of hand, not to mention the police, even the army can come to suppress it. No matter how arrogant he is, he doesn't dare to fight with the state. That's why he has been delaying and not looking for trouble with Jiang Hai. If it weren't for the fact that his startup funds came from these people, he might have abandoned them long ago. Now looking at these people again, it would be strange if he was in a good mood. Don't look at us like that, Billy. This time, we are not here to ask you to kill Jiang Hai. We are here to ask you to cooperate with him. Looking at Billy Wallen's unhappy expression, the leader of the black-clothed men said with a smile, "Cooperation? Why would I cooperate with a cattle farmer?" Billy Wallen asked puzzledly when he heard the words of the man in black. "That's because you don't know how much money he makes from raising cattle. The highest quality beef on the market now comes from Jiang Hai's manor, and it is even sold to Huaxia. Do you know how much he earns from one cow? $150,000. $150,000. He has 20,000 cows. That's $3 billion. Aren't you tempted?" Looking at Billy Wallen, the man in black chuckled, then said with a serious face. When he heard 3 billion, Billy Wallen's heart was indeed shocked. In the United States, there are urban and rural areas, And people in the city also like to call people in the countryside country bumpkins. Originally, he thought that Jiang Hai was just a cattle farmer, and his total assets, including land, were only $800 million. But he really didn't think that raising cattle was so profitable. 20,000 cows are worth $3 billion? Since when are dollars so easy to earn? Really? Looking at the man in black beside him, Billy Wallen asked with some doubts. Of course. Hearing his words, the man in black also laughed. This is the news that his master told him. Then what do you want? Seeing the sincerity of the man in black, Billy Wallen became suspicious again. We want his beef. As long as you take over the manor or cooperate with him. We want all the beef in his manor. We will sell it at the highest price. Unless we don't want it, we can't sell it to others. It seems that the Yin family saw the profits from Jiang Hai's beef. Indeed, it was on the opening day of Qi Li's restaurant. When the plate of beef from Jiang Hai's manor appeared, it attracted the attention of countless people. The people present were basically elites or high-level members of society. They had eaten delicious food before. However, to be honest, they were a little surprised to see such delicious beef. The beef was juicy, but there were no veins. The feeling of the fat and meat melting in their mouths, and the rich taste of the beef exploding on their taste buds, made everyone a little dazed. Subconsciously, they picked up their knives and forks and ate piece by piece. When the beef was finished, everyone felt even hungrier. The desire for the beef made these high-level people calm down. There were some people from the quality inspection department who wanted to take a look at the kitchen because they were afraid that there were things that the country did not allow. But when they got to the kitchen, they realized that the beef was good because of the meat. The ingredients were very simple. Immediately, many people inquired about the origin of Qi Li's beef. However, Qi Li and the Qi family naturally wouldn't say anything. Therefore, everyone was confused. Only Jiang Hai's family knew that the beef might have something to do with Jiang Hai. After a careful investigation, sure enough, the beef that had caused a sensation in the upper class of American society also came from Jiang Hai's place. This made them more and more panicked. If Jiang Hai fully supported Qi Li, then Qi Li's restaurant business would be a huge blow to their family. However, if they were to buy such beef, they could foresee that Jiang Hai wouldn't sell it. Since they couldn't get it through normal channels, they could only use other channels. Billy Wallen was the best candidate. They were very clear about Billy Wallen's greed. If he really managed to get Jiang Hai's manor, it would be beneficial to them. If he couldn't get it, then Jiang Hai and Billy Wallen would definitely have a conflict. If Billy Wallen got rid of Jiang Hai, haha, that would be something they wanted to see the most. If they wanted the fish to take the bait, they had to set the bait. A conflict between Jiang Hai and Billy Wallen was something they wanted to see the most. Hey, now that you mention it, I am really interested in this guy's manner. Billy Wallen touched his chin and said with a smile. Looking at his face, the man in black knew that this greedy guy was tempted. Just like Marx said, as long as there was an appropriate profit, capital would be bold. If there was a 10% profit, it was guaranteed to be used everywhere. If there was a 2% profit, it would be active. If there was a 50% profit, it would take risks. If there was a 100% profit, it would dare to trample on all human laws. If there was a 300% profit, it would dare to commit any crime, even at the risk of being hanged. In Billy Wallen's eyes, Jiang Hai was a real fat sheep. Of course, he wasn't someone who would believe everything the man in black said. However, if he investigated himself and found out that Jiang Hai really had a lot of profit, he might get involved. In his opinion, Jiang Hai was nothing more than a rich man from the countryside. It was like a child walking on the street with a piece of gold. As long as someone wanted to, he was destined to be unable to keep the gold. The Walmart Group could help him block some of the pressure from the business and political world. But for these people, the Walmart Group was nothing. For these desperate desperados, there was nothing better than green dollars. Therefore, when Billy Wallen heard about the $3 billion, he had already made up his mind. That night, Billy Wallen's men asked around and collected information about Jiang Hai. In the end, they heard that Jiang Hai's cows were indeed very valuable, but half of the 20,000 cows couldn't be sold. Even so, the cows in Jiang Hai's manor were worth $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion, not $150,000. When he heard this, Billy Wallen's eyes lit up. If he could get the money or the cows, he didn't mind taking some risks. There were only a few police officers in Winthrop. As long as he didn't have a direct confrontation with the government probably wouldn't do anything to him. Just like that, a plan about Jiang Hai's manor gradually took shape in Billy Wallen's treacherous mind. Chapter 403. You just lie down like this every day? Are you really okay? Looking at Jiang Hai lying on the recliner in front of her and playing with his mobile phone, Bernice said with a look of displeasure. She saw him go out in the morning to buy ingredients and then lie down here. It was really leisurely. What's the matter with me? Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai asked strangely. In his manner, everything is going according to plan. There are still more than 15,000 cows left, and they will all be sold out in 2 batches. These are the work of Robbins Garcia. Jiang Hai is only responsible for making money and paying for other things. He still trusts Robbins. As the saying goes, don't doubt the people you use, and don't use the people you doubt. If they play any tricks under his nose, then they won't be able to find such a good job in the future. The fishery has not officially started to make money. Although the fish have risen a lot, it will take at least a year to raise them. That is to say, the fish can only be officially harvested in March next year. Now it is mainly a monitoring period to see if the fish, crabs, shrimps, lobsters, and so on will be sick. If the food is not enough, they need to add some food. These are all the responsibility of Edward Anderson. Like the cowboys, they can't find such a good job. The grape winery has just planted the grape trees in March this year. Although it is said that the older the grape trees, the better, Jiang Hai's grapes are different from ordinary grapes. He added aura to them. But even so, the grape growth period is half a year. If he wants to harvest the grapes to make wine, he has to wait until at least September. If he wants to make ice wine, he has to wait until the frost. However, Boston is not very suitable for making ice wine, because the cold time here is still relatively late, unlike in Canada. There is frost in October because it is too far north. Almost many places are near the Arctic Circle. Therefore, the ice wine produced there is also the best in the world, because the frost time is the earliest. Jiang Hai mainly wants to make red wine this year. Ice wine and other things, he will talk about it later. There was almost no need for Jiang Hai to be busy with work. There were people running the ranch, the fishery, and the winery. He didn't need to worry about the hygiene of the room. Every day, when Delina and Marion cleaned up their own rooms, they would clean up Jiang Hai's room for him. The pets also knew that they shouldn't go to the toilet in the villa, including the 2 capybaras that had just arrived. In this regard, Jiang Hai really had nothing to do. In the past, he had to cook 3 meals. Now he didn't even have to cook 3 meals. In the morning, he casually took a bite. In the afternoon, he also casually took a bite. In the evening, he was waiting for Xiaoya to cook a big meal. So if he wasn't carefree, who else would be? He really had nothing to do, so he just lay there and played games. If you have nothing to do in the manor, why don't you go and take a look at the town you invested in? Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice said to him with an unhappy face. A few days ago, she drove Jiang Hai's F-650 to Winthrop. Bernice also learned a lot about Jiang Hai from one of her few good friends, Shenty Clive, such as the past of the 10 girls in his manor, plus Delina and Marion. Also, how did Jiang Hai get to where he is today? And how much money did Jiang Hai invest in the town? Shenty Clive told her all of this. And after listening to her words, Bernice was also a little surprised. She really didn't expect Jiang Hai to have so much money. Jiang Hai's money alone is almost the same as her family's. However, considering that this is the money that Jiang Hai earns in a year, she was a little uneasy. If he earns so much in a year, what about in 10 years? 20 years? She seemed to see that Jiang Hai was about to admit defeat. I don't have the right to supervise. Moses Adams will help me look after it. It will be fine. Jiang Hai waved his hand and said with a smile. Indeed, he didn't understand these things. A layman didn't need to command professionals. He only needed to check the accounts. As for the construction units and the like, Wallace Kirk will naturally keep a close eye on them. After all, this is the business of the town of Winthrop. If there is a problem, then the tourism industry of the town will be finished. The new town can't afford this. This is not a national project. This is their own project. Therefore, he and the residents of the town will deliberately keep a close eye on these people. Not to mention cutting corners. Even the slightest mistake is not allowed. Under such circumstances, it is useless for Jiang Hai to go. He might as well use the time to play games on his phone. You are really? Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't want to move no matter what, Bernice was speechless. However, she couldn't say anything to Jiang Hai because he really didn't have anything to do. He didn't have anything to do, he was just too idle. Boss, a group of people wants to see you. They said they are here to discuss a business deal. Just as Jiang Hai and Bernice were bickering, Robbins Garcia's voice suddenly came from the walkie-talkie on Jiang Hai's waist. When Jiang Hai heard Robbins Garcia's words, he couldn't help but look at the door in the distance. Jiang Hai's residential area is not very far from the door. Of course, it is difficult for ordinary people to see the situation outside the door with the naked eye, but Jiang Hai can vaguely see. At this time, in his line of sight, he saw 2 cars parked outside the door. Some dressed like hooligans are standing next to the cars, and in the front of the car, there is a middle-aged man in a suit and tie. He seems to be the leader of these people. What's the situation? Jiang Hai glanced at these people. He doesn't seem to know these people, and at a glance, he knows that these people have bad intentions. However, although he doesn't know who these people are, Jiang Hai is a little curious. Why are these people looking for me? So after thinking for a while, he stood up from the recliner and strolled towards the door. Seeing Jiang Hai standing up and walking towards the door, Bernice was also a little curious and followed Jiang Hai. Feeling that Bernice followed him, Jiang Hai didn't care and slowly walked to the door. Seeing Jiang Hai and Bernice coming out, these people subconsciously looked at him. According to the situation they know, Jiang Hai should be the owner here, but they really don't know Bernice. But these little punks, it's fine if they don't know her. Looking at Bernice's home clothes, their wolf-like eyes swept over Bernice's body, and even the people behind them whistled. Looking at these guys, Jiang Hai and Bernice couldn't help but frown. These guys are definitely not good people. I am the owner here, what's the matter? Across the iron door, Jiang Hai looked at these people in front of him and asked reluctantly, "We are here to talk to you about cooperation. I don't know if you can let us in." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man in the lead chuckled, and then said politely, "Why is it politeness? If it weren't for his, 'I'm going to eat you' expression, Jiang Hai would have really believed it. What do we have to cooperate with? We have nothing to cooperate with, you can go." Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said very clearly, "Does he need to cooperate with others? He doesn't need to. Hey, you dare to refuse us without listening to us. Do you want to die?" Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to turn around and leave, a guy with green hair stepped forward and kicked Jiang Hai's iron door. Then he shouted loudly, "You're not allowed to leave." "Oh, are you threatening me?" Hearing this guy's words, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, and he said to him with a gloomy face, "Hey, don't worry. You should listen to our cooperation project first. On behalf of Mr. Billy Wallen, I will invest $3 million in your manor and take 50% of your manor's shares. What do you think?" With a wave of his hand, the middle-aged man stopped the little punk next to him from making trouble for Jiang Hai, and then said to Jiang Hai. His tone was like Jiang Hai was taking advantage of him. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's disdainful look crawled all over his face. "I have a feeling that you are here to die. Get out of here while I'm in a good mood today." How much is Jiang Hai's manor worth? Not to mention anything else, he spent $280 million just to buy this land, plus the cows, fish and grapes in his manor. His manor was priced at $5 billion. If he sold it, he would be stupid because it would take him 2 years to earn back $500,000. But now these guys are saying that they want 50% for $3 million? They must be dreaming. "Boy, if you dare to curse again, believe it or not, I will kill you in minutes." Pointing at Jiang Hai, the hoodlum who spoke just now once again put on a brave front and shouted. He even stretched his hand into Jiang Hai's manor. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He directly grabbed the man's arm and pulled it inside. In an instant, the man felt a huge force. With a bang, he smashed into Jiang Hai's big iron gate. His face was almost flattened, but Jiang Hai didn't let go. Instead, he continued to exert more force. With two popping sounds, the man's arm instantly stretched. This was the reason why Jiang Hai dislocated his joint. Being dislocated like this, the man couldn't help but scream loudly. "Let go! F***CKU." Seeing that Jiang Hai actually dislocated their companion's arm, the punks behind these people also rushed over. Some of them went directly to the trunk of the car, took out some bats and other weapons, and distributed them to these people. But just as they rushed over, they saw a few horses in the distance. The situation here was told to Jiang Hai by Robbins. Naturally, Robbins had been paying attention to this place. When he saw that the situation was not good, he immediately found the cowboys who were herding with him and rode over. When they arrived at the scene, they also pulled out their pistols in an instant and pointed at these people with an unfriendly face. Chapter 404. The American government is indeed very protective of private property. If there is no search warrant, the police, FBI, CIA, etc., entering your property is considered trespassing. However, regarding trespassing, the degree of self-defense and counterattack varies from state to state. Of course, it is not like the legends where if someone trespasses, you can shoot the other party. That is impossible. Generally speaking, if you want to shoot an intruder in self-defense, one of the requirements is that the other party must have a weapon that can threaten you. If the intruder is empty-handed and does not constitute a threat, then it is murder if you shoot the intruder. Second, you must get the approval of the local police agency. If you see someone trespassing, you must first call the police station and explain the situation. Also, there must be surveillance cameras in the house. Under such circumstances, you can only shoot when the police ask you to. Otherwise, it is also murder. Third, if you shoot and the first shot hits the other party's arm or leg, causing the other party to lose the power to attack you, you can't shoot again. If you shoot now, it is still murder. Therefore, in the United States, most guns are actually just decorations used to scare people. It is really not easy to shoot, especially for some law-abiding citizens. Guns are really just decorations. But there was no one who was not afraid of death. When Robbins Garcia and the others revealed their guns, the people who were still clamoring instantly lost their voices and took a step back. In the whole scene, only the screams of the man whose arm was dislocated by Jiang Hai could be heard. For a moment, the whole scene was extremely strange and quiet. "Boss, what's the situation?" Robbins Garcia looked at the people outside and asked with some confusion. "These guys are here to cause trouble." While pulling the man's arm, Jiang Hai said with a smile, Wow, no need. We are just here to talk business. Didn't you Huaxia people say that even if the deal is not done, there is still benevolence? There is no need to point a gun at us." Hearing the words of Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia, the middle-aged lawyer who had already flashed to the back when the conflict broke out came over and said with a strange tone and a serious face, "You want to buy 50% of my manor for $3 million? Huh? Who would believe that you're not here to pick a fight?" Looking at the guy in front of him, Jiang Hai said with disdain. He had thought about it a long time ago. There would definitely be a lot of people eyeing him. However, he had met with some consortiums, families, and the American government. All his arrangements were to deal with these two aspects. As for the American government, he would submit the research report from the research institute to them. He could do whatever he wanted. After all, it was impossible for them to take over his territory. As for the tycoons, he had $400 million in oil futures, which was his protective talisman. However, he had never thought that these little cats and dogs from the underworld path would dare to cause trouble for him. These people from the gray path, unless they were desperados who wanted to rely on kidnapping to make a fortune, in the eyes of the rich, these people were dogs. Whether they were wild dogs or domestic dogs, they were all dogs. If they wanted to kill them, they could do so at any time. It was really difficult for people at Jiang Hai's level to look at these people in the eye. But now these people dared to cause trouble for him? It's like you were doing well in this area, But you were slapped by a kid when you went out, which made Jiang Hai very unhappy. Okay. If you don't want to sell, just say that you don't want to sell. You don't have to do this, okay? Listening to Jiang Hai's unhappy words, the lawyer here also raised his hand. He really came here to negotiate, not to fight. Hey, so I'm sorry? You're really shameless, Robbins Garcia. Call the police. Let the police deal with these guys. Listening to this guy's sophistry, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He said to Robbins Garcia beside him, and Robbins Garcia immediately picked up his phone to call the police. But before he could press the call, a police car had already driven over in the distance. What a joke. Jiang Hai is Winthrop's god of wealth. He is now not only the financial guarantee of Winthrop, but he also invested in the establishment of a tourist area. Who is the most important person in Winthrop? In the eyes of most residents, police and government officials, besides their own families, Jiang Hai is the most important. Jiang Hai's manor was the place where all the police focused on and patrolled. Every 2 or 3 minutes, a patrol car would pass by. Now that so many people gathered here, it naturally attracted the attention of these people. So the police came directly with their sirens on. When they saw the police coming, these punks were more or less afraid. How many people in the underworld are not afraid of the police? Maybe the leaders are not afraid, but these underlings are still very afraid of the police. What's the situation? The 2 police officers looked at the punks surrounding Jiang Hai's manor and avoided the reinforcements for the first time. At the same time, they got out of the car with their guns and shouted at the 2 groups of people who were still confronting each other. Mr. Police, you came at the right time. Someone committed a crime here. This person tore off our friend's arm. You have to uphold justice for us. As soon as he saw the police coming, the middle-aged lawyer winked at the punks around him and asked them to retreat first. Then he walked in front of the police and began to complain. But unfortunately, these police officers didn't even pay attention to him. Seeing these people retreat, the 2 police officers quickly walked in front of Jiang Hai and nodded respectfully, then asked Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang, what's the situation? As soon as they heard the police's words, the faces of these punks and lawyers instantly changed. Before they came, they did hear that Jiang Hai's status here was not low, but they really didn't think that the police would dare to do this in front of them. These guys came to cause trouble, and then this guy wanted to come over. I just pulled him back and didn't let him come in. Hearing the police's words, Jiang Hai also let go of the man's hand. As soon as he let go, the man instantly fell to the ground and began to scream. He had no choice but to scream. Jiang Hai not only dislocated the bones in his shoulder, but also the bones in his arm and wrist. Now his right hand was as soft as a noodle. Oh, I can see that these people don't look like good people. All of you squat down and hold your heads. We'll talk about it later when you enter the station. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the police officer immediately shouted. Hearing the police's words, the punks and lawyers here were stunned. In the past, they were the most unreasonable people, but they didn't expect that these police officers and Jiang Hai were even worse. Sir, is it really okay for you to do this? Now that our people are injured, you want us all to squat down? The middle-aged lawyer looked at the police in front of him and said with a face full of displeasure, Don't you see that you're calling me a police officer? You have the intention to intrude on other people's private property. No matter what, you deserve it. Also just now, this guy's hand did enter Mr. Jiang's manor. Don't let Mr. Jiang pull his hand out of kindness and accidentally dislocate his hand. Even if it's chopped off, it's still your responsibility. Do you understand? What did it mean to invert black and white? Hearing the police officer's words, Jiang Hai suddenly felt like he was the villain. Since when did he have the ability to make the police speak for him? Jiang Hai was really a little confused. In fact, it was inevitable that these police officers would speak for Jiang Hai. This was because in the United States, although the police were part of the government, they weren't civil servants. They were in an employer-employee relationship, just like working for some private companies to earn money. However, the ones who gave them jobs were the local government, and Jiang Hai was the biggest taxpayer in Winthrop. It could be said that the money these police officers received was Jiang Hai's tax money. If Jiang Hai paid more, they would earn more. If Jiang Hai paid less, they would earn less. If Jiang Hai paid a few million, the police department would get more than $1 million, although it was a small amount for Jiang Hai. However, for these police officers, it was a pretty good income. $50,000 a year from a middle-class family. If they made Jiang Hai unhappy, and he left for another state or county, they would lose a lot of their income. Moreover, they also heard that Jiang Hai earned more than $1 billion this year. When it was time to pay taxes next year, they would have to pay at least a few $100 million in taxes. Excluding the national taxes, they could earn a lot here. This was especially true for police officers like them. They could earn hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Therefore, Jiang Hai was their bread and butter. It was not a joke. Now, in the entire police station, Jiang Hai was the only one who didn't worship him. Therefore, not to mention just speaking for Jiang Hai, even if Jiang Hai didn't like someone, they would take the initiative to help Jiang Hai. You are abusing your power. I want to sue you. Hearing this, the middle-aged lawyer's face turned red. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. So he said loudly to the police officer in front of him, "Do as you wish." The police were used to such words. It seemed that this person was quite angry, but the police couldn't be bothered with him. Just as the gangsters didn't know how to proceed, a series of sirens rang. Several more police cars appeared in front of Jiang Hai's manor. As soon as they heard that the god of fortune was in danger, the speed and efficiency of the police were unprecedentedly high. The gangsters looked at the police officers surrounding them. To be honest, they were a little flustered. Looking at the middle-aged man in front of them, they didn't know what to do. The middle-aged lawyer could only sigh at the current situation. It seemed like the plan had to change. Chapter 405. Sorry to bother you. Walking into Jiang Hai's villa, Wallace Kirk said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "It's okay, I'm bothering you." Hearing Wallace Kirk's words, Jiang Hai said with a smile and waved his hand casually. "Beer or coffee?" Watching the three people in front of him sit down, Jiang Hai also walked to the refrigerator and asked them, "Coffee is good. We have something to do when we go back." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the three looked at each other and said. Jiang Hai also took out 3 cans of coffee from the refrigerator and heated them in the machine next to him. Jiang Hai brought them over and then sat down in front of the 3 people. For Jiang Hai, he knew 2 of the 3 people who came here. The old man sitting in the middle is none other than Wallace Kirk, the mayor of Winthrop. Next to Mayor Wallace Kirk, there are 2 men in police uniforms. The man sitting on the left is called Murray Smith. He is also an old man. This man is none other than the current chief of the Winthrop Police Department. Jiang Hai had seen him a long time ago, when he was attacked by a group of delinquents in Winthrop, and when the Winthrop Police Department broke out in a scandal, he came to ask Jiang Hai for help. Finally, it was settled through private negotiations. This man and Jiang Hai are old acquaintances. It is normal for him to come and explain this incident. As for the last person, he looks about 30 years old. It is said that he has just graduated from the police academy. But why is he here? Jiang Hai didn't ask in detail. If this person is not the nephew of Wallace Kirk and Murray Smith, he may be someone with some background, but Jiang Hai doesn't care about this. Jiang Hai is not afraid of anyone. "Mr. Jiang, this time there may be some trouble." Taking a sip of coffee, Wallace Kirk looked at Jiang Hai and hesitated. Now, it is the afternoon when those people came to Jiang Hai's house to make trouble. After the police arrested these people, they managed to get a lot of information out of them. It was because of this that Mayor Wallace Kirk came to Jiang Hai to explain the situation. What? Is the other party very powerful? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. Are those people more than just delinquents? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Wallace Kirk glanced at Murray Smith and motioned for him to speak. Murray took out a small notebook and began to talk to Jiang Hai. No, they are just some low-level guys. According to them, they are delinquents in the South District of Boston. The boss is called Billy Wallen. This guy actually seems to have a lot to do with you, Mr. Jiang. We called Boston to confirm that he was just a low-level guy. Looking at Jiang Hai, Murray Smith told Jiang Hai who his opponent was this time. According to Murray Smith, this guy named Billy Wallen was just a small lackey. He had a lot to do with Jiang Hai. First, when Jiang Hai was attacked for the first time, there were two people in charge. One was Faraday Wilson, and the other was Bunyan Wallen. Bunyan Wallen was Billy Wallen's younger brother, but at that time, he did not have the basic ability to be cocky with Jiang Hai. The second thing was that when Jiang Hai rescued Delina and the others, the men who originally controlled them, the boss above them was Billy Wallen's original boss. Because of Jiang Hai's intervention, not only did they lose a lot of income, but the police in Boston also cracked down on them for a while in order to give an explanation to Jiang Hai. The original boss wanted to escape to Europe at this time, but he was killed as soon as he went to sea. During that period of power vacuum, Billy Wallen used money from who knows where to organize a group of people. The second attack on Jiang Hai, which was the most dangerous one, now seemed to be vaguely pointing to Billy Wallen. But later, after he found that Jiang Hai was not easy to deal with, for some reason, he hid for a while. But no one knew where he got the news from, or what. But he actually wanted to attack Jiang Hai's manor. And this time, although the other party was threatening, they did not invade Jiang Hai's territory, and there was no substantial threat. There was a lawyer in the other party's team, and they did not even say anything racist. Obviously, it was impossible to sue them. The best result was that Jiang Hai beat them up for nothing, and then these people would be released after 48 hours. For this, Murray Smith could only come over and apologize to Jiang Hai. What does that mean? I know that these people want to harm me, but I can't arrest them? Looking at Murray Smith in front of him, Jiang Hai frowned. He was not afraid of thieves stealing, but he was afraid of thieves thinking about him. Now that he was being thought about by others all day, Jiang Hai was not comfortable. I'm here to tell you that I will strengthen the defense here again. I will patrol your place 24 hours a day, and there are 2 police cars stationed here. This is Doyle George, the main person in charge of the defense here. You can ask him to do anything, and it's best not to leave your place in the next few days. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Murray Smith shook his head helplessly. In fact, to be honest, he was not willing to do so. He also wanted to go and arrest them directly. After all, if he curried favor with Jiang Hai, whether it was for public or private reasons, it would only be beneficial to them. But after all, this was a world where laws were spoken. Although in the United States, the rich were the law, and the police were the best bodyguards for the rich. Just like Jiang Hai now, having a special police officer to protect him and stand guard for him. This was his privilege. Hearing Murray Smith introduce himself, the seemingly young police officer nodded to Jiang Hai. Compared to Mayor Wallace Kirk and Murray Smith, who were almost fawning over Jiang Hai and had an extremely humble attitude, this young man's attitude was much more familiar to Jiang Hai. He felt that the police in China had this kind of expression when handling cases. Then I'll have to trouble you. Looking at Murray Smith, Jiang Hai also nodded, indicating that he would have to trouble them. After glancing at Jiang Hai, Murray Smith thought for a moment and said to Jiang Hai, "By the way, in addition to the police, we don't know how the other party will infiltrate here. If the other party wants to attack by force, it will be troublesome. So if you need, our police station can lend you some equipment." Although guns were not banned in the United States, the only guns that could be bought by civilians were semi-automatic guns, which could not be fired continuously, one bullet at a time. If it was against automatic weapons, the firepower would indeed be somewhat lacking. And to obtain automatic weapons, there were 2 ways. One was to have a special gun license. Like Bell Lester, he had a license to use automatic weapons and sniper rifles. But he was unwilling to kill people. The other way was to hold a license privately. But if you want to buy it, other than the black market and the army, only the police station had it. In order to please Jiang Hai, Murray Smith was ready to borrow guns. Of course, these guns were registered to the police station near Jiang Hai's house, but they were given to Jiang Hai to use. Hearing Murray Smith's words, Jiang Hai frowned. Indeed, this was Murray Smith's move to please Jiang Hai. But on the other hand, these people might really attack Jiang Hai's manor. There are so many desperados in the United States. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. To be honest, he was very lazy and afraid of trouble. If the United States was always so troublesome, Then should he consider changing places? But it was useless to say this now, because the first thing Jiang Hai had to do now was to guard against possible attacks. Sigh. The government has always wanted to ban guns over the years, but when the United States was first established, it relied on not banning guns to win the majority of the people's consent from the Europeans. It is not easy to abolish the ban on guns. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace Kirk also sighed. Among all the peaceful countries, the United States had the highest number of shootings every year. Obviously, for any government, guns were not a good thing. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also shrugged his shoulders. To be honest, the ban on guns was also a very important point for the United States, to attract people to travel and play. For example, in China, there were too few people who had played with guns. This was also one of the main reasons they came here to play. Jiang Hai immediately called Belle Lester. Compared to raising cattle, Belle Lester was more proficient in this area. When he heard that someone was eyeing Jiang Hai's manor and might attack, Belle Lester was very excited. Whether it was Mayor Wallace or Director Smith, they all knew what this sunny boy used to do. To be honest, they were quite relieved to have him by Jiang Hai's side. After briefly explaining the situation here, Belle took stock of the weapons in the manor. It seemed to be the same, but no one would complain about having too little firepower, so it was reasonable to borrow some equipment from the police station. After everyone made the decision, Jiang Hai drove with Belle to the police station. They were going to look for equipment there. At the same time, Jiang Hai also called Moses Adams. He still had some things to ask him to do, since the last time he spent money to solve the problem in Miami. Jiang Hai felt that rich people should spend money to solve their problems. But it was not convenient for him to do these things, so it was good for Moses Adams to do it. Chapter 406. Wow, you have quite a variety of things here. Following Murray Smith, Jiang Hai brought Belle to the Winthrop police station. After greeting the local police, they entered the armory. As soon as they walked in, Belle could not help but exclaim softly. Indeed, although the Winthrop police station did not look big, because it was by the sea, it was also considered a border defense. Therefore, the armory of the police station here was the best in terms of quantity and quality among all the armory of the standing police station. Looking around, there were a lot of guns in this room. That was about 100 square meters. There were guns hanging on the walls, on the floor, and in some developed partitions that looked like locker rooms, there were also miniguns. Basically, there were all kinds of long guns, rifles, and shotguns. These were the most important ones. Among these guns, there was one that Jiang Hai was very familiar with. He also had an August at home. However, the difference was that the August here was not the kind that could fire a bullet with the pull of the trigger. Instead, it was an automatic gun. If the trigger was not released, it would continuously fire. Other than the August, the most common guns were the M16 and the M4. In fact, in the eyes of some people who did not know much about guns, there was no difference between the M16 and the M4. When Jiang Hai played Counter-Strike, which was also known as Counter-Strike, he often called the .43 used by the police an M16, but it was actually an M4. Those who really knew guns understood that there was a big difference between these two guns. The M16 was an automatic rifle, while the M4 was a carbine. Carbines were also in the category of rifles. However, because the barrel was short, the shooting accuracy was high, and the gun itself was light, so it was considered a strategic weapon. Those who read military literature often knew that in a war, an area of effect attack was required. Rifles were specifically aimed at enemies within 100 to 300 meters. Beyond 300 meters, machine guns were used to suppress enemies. Within 50 meters, it was the territory of submachine guns. Between 50 and 100 meters, there was a vacuum period. The existence of the carbine was to make up for this vacuum period. Logically speaking, an M4 would be sufficient for a police gun. The M16 was not originally intended for police stations. This type of rifle was exclusively used by the military. However, after the 9/11 incident in the United States, the M16 was widely promoted to police stations. However, they were a few generations younger than the military. For example, the military was currently using M16A4S, while there were only M16A1S and A2S here. In addition, there were long guns and shotguns. There were two types of shotguns. One was brown and ordinary, and the other was green. The green ones were anti-riot. They used number 12 beanbag bullets. They didn't have much penetrating power, but they were quite painful. One shot wouldn't turn you into a sieve, but it would break your bones in an instant. It was similar to the rubber bullets used in the earliest escort vehicles in China. In addition to these more common guns, there were many special weapons. There weren't many of these weapons, but there were many of them. For example, there were various sniper rifles. Although there were only one or two of each model, they were enough to be used. For example, there were Matley M109, SVD, AW50, AS50, M24 and so on. There were also many rifles, such as the beautiful XM8 Scar, and so on. However, these weren't what Jiang Hai and Bell wanted. Although they wanted to take a few guns back, these guns were only borrowed by Jiang Hai. After this incident, they would have to be returned. Moreover, these guns and bullets were all labeled. If Jiang Hai played around with them, there would be trouble. Moreover, borrowing guns from the Winthrop Police Department was also risky. It was better to borrow as little as possible. After looking around, Jiang Hai and Bell discussed for a while, and decided to borrow 3 guns. In the manner, other than Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy, the other men had guns. Although they only had handguns and shotguns, their defense was enough. However, their defense was more or less sufficient. What they lacked now was long-range firepower. Bell already had a sniper rifle, and that was enough. However, the suppressive firepower was not enough. Therefore, out of the 3 guns they chose a submachine gun. This was the best weapon for close combat within 50 meters. This gun was the MP5, which was known as the king of submachine guns. Of course, it was not the original version. It had been modified a long time ago. It was now called the MP5K. There was no stock, so the weight was reduced, but the speed was increased, and the combat effectiveness was improved again. In addition to this gun, Bell also chose an MG36. This gun was actually not very popular with gun enthusiasts, because this gun was an evolved version of the MG36. It fired 5.56 NATO bullets, which were not very powerful. This gun was not a real machine gun, nor a light machine gun. At most, it was a piece of equipment to supplement continuous firepower. However, in the eyes of professionals, this gun was quite good. It was light and accurate, although the shooting speed was a little slow. As long as it was not a real war between big countries, it would be a good weapon. Whether it was used for anti-terrorism or suppression, it was a good choice. There were many people in the Delta who used it. After choosing these 2 guns, Murray Smith also gave Bell 3 basic sets of bullets. Now there was only 1 gun left. In fact, according to Bell, these 2 guns were enough. However, considering that Jiang Hai had not played with them yet, he decided to let Jiang Hai look at them again. This was one of the ways to please the boss. Can I take this gun? Looking at the guns here, Jiang Hai was honestly very interested. But to choose one of these guns, he was a little hesitant. Just as he did not know how to choose, he suddenly found a big guy in a corner. This guy was really quite big and thick, especially the gun with several barrels tied together. Jiang Hai suddenly had a feeling that he liked it very much. This gun was similar to the revolving machine gun used by the Terminators in the Terminator movies. It looked really fierce. This is fine, but where do you put it? Put it on the roof. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Murray Smith hesitated and asked Jiang Hai, because he really did not think that Jiang Hai would use this gun. In fact, it was just that he did not think about it. Since this gun was sent to the police station, they have not used it. This gun was called a Gatling M134. It was a rapid-fire machine gun, but it was basically fixed. 7.62mm bullets were definitely a huge killing machine now. Generally speaking, this kind of gun was installed on planes and ships. In the Army's battle, the number of times it was used was not too many, because this gun could penetrate any steel pipe or reinforced concrete building within a range of 100 meters. Such a killing machine was really easy to accidentally injure. The firing rate of each of the 6 barrels was about 950 rounds. In theory, the firing rate could reach 6,000 rounds per minute. So after this thing was sent here, it has been many years, maybe more than 10 years. Since then, no one has used this thing except for Li Xing's protection. Now that Jiang Hai asked, Maris Smith subconsciously answered, "Then I'll take this. Why put it on the roof? I can hold it myself." Thinking about holding this thing in his hands, Jiang Hai was really a little excited. He walked over and used his right arm, and in an instant, this big thing was lifted up by Jiang Hai. This gun did not include the ammunition feeder and motor, and its empty weight was 15.9 kilograms. With these 2 things installed, it weighed 26 kilograms. That was 26 kilograms, not 26 kilograms. It was the weight of a bag of rice, and there was a lot of recoil when it was fired. Now that they heard Jiang Hai's words, Maris Smith and Belle both smiled. "That boss, you are strong, but to hold this thing and fire directly, this is reality, after all, not a movie." Looking at Jiang Hai, Belle Lester said a little awkwardly. He had been in the Delta for so many years, but he had never seen anyone who could hold such a heavy machine gun and fire directly. "Why don't we try it?" Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then walked into the shooting range behind the police station. When they walked in, there were many new police officers practicing in the shooting range. In the United States, there were almost no police schools. More than 90% of the policemen were recruited by the government. Most of these people were veterans, or ordinary people with no criminal records. Winthrop was a big tourist attraction, and there were many tourists, so naturally, they needed more policemen. Therefore, during the construction of the town, they also expanded the police force. The police in the town now were not like before, where there were only 20 people. Now there were more than 50 police officers in the town, but the remaining 30 or so were all new and still needed to practice. Seeing Jiang Hai walk over, most of the policemen here actually knew him. After all, he was the richest man in Winthrop. Even if they had just arrived, they were assigned to patrol around Jiang Hai's manor. At first, they were a little unhappy, but when their weekly salary came, their dissatisfaction disappeared. This was their god of wealth, and they had to protect it. Now that they saw Jiang Hai walk over with an M134, they all looked at him curiously. Jiang Hai and the others were not careless. They walked to an empty target, and Jiang Hai waved to the side. The staff in charge of the shooting range in the police station came up and installed the motor and ammunition feeder for Jiang Hai. Of course, there were also 100 bullets in it. This was also the standard configuration of this kind of gun. If the force was strong enough, it could be dragged on the ground like a chain of bullets and no one would care. Looking at the gun in front of him, it was ready. Jiang Hai could not help but take a deep breath and take a lunge to offset the recoil. At the same time, he stared at the paper figurine in front of him. His hand was on the trigger, and as he pulled it gently, a series of sounds spread throughout the shooting range. Chapter 407. Pa! With a crisp sound, in a room in the south of Boston, Billy Wallen, with a gloomy face, threw the glass of vodka in his hand heavily on the floor. The broken glass instantly exploded in all directions, but none of the people standing in the room avoided it. They all lowered their heads and stood there without looking sideways. "This guy is digging his own grave." I kindly extended my little finger to him, but he didn't hold it tightly. Instead, he dared to grab my people. "He must be tired of living," Billy Wallen said with a gloomy face as he narrowed his eyes. Yesterday, after he heard that Jiang Hai was making money, he was tempted. In fact, if it was some large consortium or plutocrat making money, people like him would not dare to show off. In fact, half a year ago, he would not have dared to show off to Jiang Hai either. However, his development in the past 6 months had made him a little arrogant. In South Boston, he had always regarded himself as the overlord of the underworld. Jiang Hai did not give him any face this time. This was hard for him, who had recently become arrogant, to accept. In his opinion, Jiang Hai was just a rich man from the countryside. What could he do with money? He had more than 1,000 men and hundreds of guns. Not to mention rebelling here. It was not a problem for him to make trouble for Jiang Hai. Originally, in his opinion, Giving Jiang Hai $3 million was already too much, but Jiang Hai did not give him any face at all. This made him want to kill him, because Jiang Hai's manner was really a delicious piece of fat meat for him. Jiang Hai caused the death of his former boss. He did not care because if his former boss did not die, he would not have been able to sit in this position. Jiang Hai caused his brother to go to prison. He also did not care. In their line of work, even if they died, they could not blame anyone. However, Jiang Hai was guarding a large pile of wealth and was not willing to let him touch it. This made him very unhappy. "You guys go and teach him a lesson," Billy Wallen said with hatred as he sat gloomily on the chair. Although he couldn't wait to shoot Jiang Hai to death and then take over his manor, he knew that it was impossible. If he showed up, even if Jiang Hai died, he would have to run away. A billionaire was killed in his own home. If the American authorities didn't kill him, how would they explain it to their citizens? Therefore, he wasn't too stupid and knew to let his underling go. The people around him were all outlaws. Their job was to lick the blood on the blade. After hearing Billy Wallen's words, they lowered their heads and walked out of the room one by one. That night, phone calls were made from these people's phones. Although Billy Wallen claimed to have thousands of subordinates, most of them were just ordinary gangsters. If you asked these hooligans to sell flour, guard a place or guard a gate, they wouldn't care. However, if you asked them to fight, they would have to think twice. If they had to use guns to fight, then half of them would probably run away. If they had to attack a billionaire's manor with guns, then they wouldn't go no matter what. It was precisely because of this that these people found some people who were loyal. However, because the relationship between the police and Jiang Hai was very good, these underlings who couldn't fight had other uses, which was to block the road. Jiang Hai's manor was located in the middle of Winthrop and Boston. There was only a two-way four-lane road there. As long as the road was blocked, it would be impossible for the Winthrop police and Boston police to come. However, these underlings still dared to block the road. As the phone calls were made, more and more people gathered in the Boston area. As soon as the people gathered, the Boston police, who had been watching these people, immediately sent news. After receiving the news, the Winthrop police chief, Murray Smith, also immediately sent a message to Jiang Hai. At this time, Jiang Hai was at home discussing with Moses Adams how to deal with Billy Wallen. In Jiang Hai's view, the best way to deal with Billy Wallen was naturally to spend money to get rid of him, just like in Miami. However, after asking the local tyrant Moses Adams, Jiang Hai knew that this might not be very reliable. This was because Boston had originally been the domain of the Gray Gang since ancient times. After the American government regained control of Boston, the impact of Boston's management was huge. It was a huge blow to Boston. Before Billy Wallen, Boston didn't even have a Gray Gang with more than 100 members. Of course, this was referring to the subordinates, not the businesses they controlled. After all, their businesses still needed ordinary people to run, such as waiters and doormen. These were not considered their staff. The main reason why Billy Wallen could expand so quickly was that he had the financial support of some people in Huaxia. The United States was a capitalist country, and money meant everything. Even if they knew that the other party was the Gray Gang, as long as the money was in place, the police wouldn't dare to make a move without enough evidence. Of course, this was also because the other party had been established for too short a time, and too much evidence had not been formed yet. If they stayed for another 1 or 2 years, the evidence would be conclusive, and the Gray Gang would not be far from destruction. Boston was one of the key cities of the Federation. It was precisely because of this that there were not enough forces to accept Jiang Hai's business. Rewards could be offered in Miami, but not in Boston. Just as Jiang Hai was having a headache about how to deal with these guys, Murray Smith called. "It seems that you may not be able to go back today." Hanging up the phone, Jiang Hai looked at Moses Adams and shrugged. "Oh, it's really exciting to work with a boss like you, but I believe that you will protect me, right?" Looking at Jiang Hai's expression, and the fact that Jiang Hai did not deliberately avoid the sound of the phone call, Moses Adams himself heard some of the sound. He knew that the guy called Billy Wallen was about to make a move. "Get ready, the other party may be here soon." Jiang Hai looked at Moses Adams, picked up the walkie-talkie beside him, and spoke to everyone in the manor. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people in the manor moved. Although it was because of Jiang Hai that they were put in danger, these people didn't care very much, because they knew that this matter had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was not a person who took the initiative to provoke trouble, but because some people were eyeing Jiang Hai's manor. Although Jiang Hai's men were the first to come here, they had only been with him for 8 months. But they did not panic or complain at this time. When Jiang Hai came back from the police station, he had already told them that the manor was in trouble now. Those who wanted to leave, Jiang Hai would not let them stay. But those who stayed had to protect the manor. Americans were quite desperate to protect their private property. No one left on the spot, and they made their own plans. As Jiang Hai's voice fell, the people in the villa area moved. Bell, Harriman Fells, Burke Dollar, and Robbins Garcia all gathered in front of Jiang Hai's villa for the first time. In front of Jiang Hai's villa, they had modified the car that was originally parked there to form a protective wall. They would resist the enemy here, while Bell went to the roof. This was where he should be as a sniper. At this time, Jiang Hai was also sitting in front of his villa. Beside him was the M134 he borrowed, as well as a box of 2,000 bullets. He believed that these things would leave a deep impression on those people. Philip Turner's family, Tommy Charles's family, Eleanor Cece's family, Edward Anderson's family, Cyrus Gerard, and O'Connor Murphy gathered in Edward Anderson's villa, forming another crossfire site. Of course, Marin Rupert went to the hangar. If there was any trouble, he would send these people away by plane. In addition, helicopters could also be used for fighting. Finally, after receiving the news, Aphrodite and the others immediately came to Jiang Hai's villa. Even if they wanted to leave now, they had nowhere to go. When these people arrived in front of Jiang Hai's villa, 8 police cars drove over in the distance. In each of the 8 police cars, there were 4 policemen. These police cars formed the first protective wall outside the gate of Jiang Hai's villa. Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia, and the others were lying in ambush in front of the villa. They formed the second layer of protection. If these 2 layers of protection were broken, it meant that God wanted Jiang Hai to die. When the time came, he would take everyone to the airport. If the villa was hit by a disaster, they could still rebuild it. If someone died, even if only one died, Jiang Hai would be sad for the rest of his life. This was also the escape route that they had discussed long ago. All the preparations continued. Everyone was smoking in boredom, enjoying the calm before the storm. Jiang Hai also smoked for the first time today. Jiang Hai was not a good kid. When he was in junior high, he was the most rebellious and curious, so he learned to smoke with his classmates. However, because of the winter in Bing City, smoking was too uncomfortable. In his second year of high school, he used his willpower to quit. Later, when he went to work, he also did not have any pressure and did not pick up cigarettes. Later, when his parents got into an accident, although it was resolved because of Chile, he did not smoke again. At this time, he really felt some pressure. The dozens of people in the villa were under his control. However, after smoking a few cigarettes, Jiang Hai could not help but frown. To be honest, he was still not used to smoking. But even if it was just a pipe, it was fine. He was also killing time. Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, and Dai Feng were beside him. Because Qiu Qiu could not fly and could not be used as a scout, it was left in the villa. These 3 guys seemed to have felt the calm before the big battle. They were all lying there, and the atmosphere was quite tense. Chapter 408. Mr. Jiang Hai. The latest news says that they have left Boston. It's about half an hour's drive away from here. If you leave now, it's still not too late. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, a policeman walked into Jiang Hai's manor. Looking at this policeman, not only Jiang Hai, but even Robbins and the others smiled disdainfully. Hide. They really don't know how to do that. Is this your idea or Murray Smith's? But Jiang Hai raised his head with a cigarette in his mouth, looked at the policeman in front of him, and said indifferently. Jiang Hai naturally knew this policeman. During the day, he came with Murray Smith and Wallace Mayer. His name is Doyle George. Jiang Hai didn't know what he did, but he knew that this guy's family was not ordinary, otherwise It would be impossible to ask him, a newcomer, to be in charge of Jianghai. Jianghai was born to be poor, so he didn't have a good impression of some of the second generation. Even if he was rich now, he still didn't have a good impression of the second generation. Whether it was the second generation of an official or a rich second generation, as long as it was the second or third generation, Jianghai wouldn't be happy. So when he heard his words, Jianghai's words were still a bit harsh. Naturally, it's my idea. But when he heard Jianghai's words, the man didn't care, but continued. Then we'll wait until you hear from Maris Smith. We won't leave until we see him. Jianghai fiercely took a puff of the cigarette in his mouth. He blew out a smoke ring and said indifferently, "Is money really so important? More important than life?" Looking at Jianghai, the policeman thought that Jianghai didn't want to leave, because he didn't want to leave his manor. Indeed, if Jianghai left and these people entered Jianghai's manor, it would really cause a lot of losses. But compared to life, no matter how much money was, it was not as important as life in his eyes. Life is naturally important, money is also important. Do you know how much my manor is worth? Now, not to mention other things, just the land and cattle are worth $5 billion. Otherwise, why do you think Wallace and Murray sent so many people here? Don't be kidding. Okay, little policeman, you just do your job. If you can't resist in a while, you can retreat first. We have a plane, and it's fast if we want to leave. Jianghai threw the cigarette, but in his mouth to the ground and stamped it out. Then he looked at the policeman in front of him with a serious face. This little policeman only knew that Jianghai's manor was worth some money, but he really didn't know how much it was worth. It was like a child in the city in China. It was difficult to know how much a developed mountain in the countryside was worth. In their eyes, how much could a wild mountain be worth? But they didn't know that a mountain with development value would be worth at least $100 million. Jianghai's manor was definitely worth much more than a small hill in China. Jianghai couldn't just give up like this. We won't retreat because our orders are to guard here. Since you already have a backup plan and don't want to leave, then so be it. Hearing that Jianghai's manor was worth so much money, the policeman didn't say anything else. Although the world was shouting that life was priceless, how much was a human life really worth? In China, if someone was hit by a car and died in an accident, the compensation would basically be $200,000 or $300,000, which was already not bad. If someone died in a medical accident during treatment in the hospital, the compensation would only be tens of thousands, or even nothing. If there was a conflict and someone accidentally killed someone, the compensation would be even less, because they would be sentenced. So, how much was a civilian's life worth? It was definitely not worth $5 billion, so Jianghai wanted to protect this place. He didn't say anything, turned around and left Jianghai's side, went outside, and prepared to set up a defense. This kid is a bit interesting. Looking at the man's back as he left, Jianghai lit up a cigarette and started smoking. The only gun they borrowed today was the M134 in Jianghai's hand. They didn't borrow any other guns, because Robbins and the others didn't know how to use them. Just as Jianghai was talking to this guy, a convoy of about 30 cars had already set off from Boston. These people weren't stupid. They knew that if they rushed over so blatantly, they would probably be stopped before they could get there. As soon as they left Boston, the police would definitely stop them. So when they were in Boston, only 5 cars came out. The rest of the cars went out in batches at different times and times. After they passed the airport, they were reunited. At this time, the police found out that the other party didn't just send 5 cars, but a total of 30. There were all kinds of cars in the 30 cars. Most of them were sedans, but there were also minivans and commercial vehicles. According to the news from Boston, most of these cars were full of people. There were almost 200 people in 30 cars. When this number was reported, it really scared a lot of people. Winthrop and Boston sent reinforcements to Jianghai's manor almost at the same time. But unfortunately, these people were really bad. On the way, many cars broke down on the road. Needless to say, their purpose was to stop the police cars. After all, there was no direct evidence that these people were related to Billy Wallen's gang. Although this could not stop the police for too long, even if it was only for half an hour, everything was unknown. After receiving the news, Jiang Hai's face also changed. He originally thought that the other party would only send 30 or 50 people, but he did not expect that there would be hundreds of people. This time, it was really troublesome. Outside, Doyle George's face was also very ugly. After all, they were the first line of defense. If they were finished, everything would be over. At this moment, he repositioned the car to prevent the other party from increasing their line of attack, while reducing their line of attack. At the same time, Winthrop immediately sent police cars, but to their surprise, the driveway from Winthrop to Jiang Hai's manor was also blocked. It seemed that this Billy Wallen was not an idiot. He had already calculated everything. This time, although the conflict had not yet started, it was already a big event. The authorities of Boston and the county of Winthrop immediately sent messages to the government of Massachusetts and the federal authorities of the United States. But distant water could not quench a nearby fire. Everything was moving in a bad direction. Mr. Jiang, now is your last chance. You can still leave by helicopter. Just as the bad news came one after another, Doyle George's voice came from Jiang Hai's walkie-talkie. He was still persuading Jiang Hai to leave. Thank you, but I'm still going to fight. Listening to Doyle George's words, Jiang Hai frowned. The battle began. Not long after Jiang Hai's voice fell, the sound of brakes could be heard in the distance. Then, a motorcade consisting mainly of vans and commercial vehicles rushed towards Jiang Hai's manor, like a gust of wind. The motorcade in front, listen, stop immediately for inspection. Otherwise we will shoot. Looking at the cars rushing over, they would definitely not shoot first. Doyle George shouted loudly into the walkie-talkie. Unfortunately, these cars didn't care about the police. When they accelerated instead of slowing down, they stepped on the accelerator and crashed into the first defensive wall formed by the 8 police cars in front of them. A loud bang was heard. The cars in front crashed directly into the police cars. The impact of the collision not only shocked the people in the cars, but also shocked the people in the cars. Even the police hiding behind the cars were shaken. At this time, a few cars directly jumped over the police cars and wanted to hit the gate. Seeing this, Doyle George did not hesitate. Since the other party crashed into the police cars, even if they did not shoot, it was a declaration of war. He immediately ordered, fire. Then, the police who were still conscious immediately took out the weapons in their hands and shot at the cars in front of them. But at this time, the vans that were originally blocking them also opened, and a group of people ran out. They quickly retreated to the back of the cars and began to take the initiative to attack the police. People were threatening. Between a close attack and a car far away, people would subconsciously choose to attack closer. So many police officers turned their muzzles at once. And this was what these people hoped for. Billy Wallen did have hundreds of guns, but these guns were all small pistols and non-automatic weapons. Fighting with the police was courting death. There was a huge gap in firepower. He did not want to provoke the police, so his main purpose now was to attract the police. The key first target was Jiang Hai. 2 of the cars were forced to stop as the police were distracted by the commotion. But there were still 5 cars that directly crashed through the protective fence outside Jiang Hai's gate and went straight into Jiang Hai's manor. Looking at the 5 cars rushing over, Jiang Hai asked on the other side of the walkie-talkie, "Can I fire?" "Of course." Doyle George on the other side said to Jiang Hai while attacking these cars and people. The moment his voice fell, Jiang Hai had already stood up from the ground. At the same time, he raised his little cutie, the borrowed M134. Looking at the 5 cars rushing over in front of him, Jiang Hai aimed a little, and then pressed the button to fire. The first person who wanted to turn was shot by the monster in Jiang Hai's hand before he could move. The bullet pierced through the windshield of the car. His body tilted and fell on the steering wheel. Then the car he controlled went off course. The car turned and hit another car. The 2 cars, one on the left and one on the right, directly flipped over on Jiang Hai's lawn. Chapter 409. Pai Pai. 2 commercial vehicles flipped over on the lawn and came to a stop. Of the 2 drivers in the vehicles, One was dead, and the other was injured. As for the others, Jiang Hai did not know. But he could guess that these people were no longer a threat to Jiang Hai for the time being. Then, Jiang Hai looked at the other 3 vehicles. However, those 3 vehicles had already crossed over when Jiang Hai had taken care of the 2 vehicles. What a joke! Who would dare to drive a private vehicle into a place guarded by machine guns? Oh no, heavy machine guns. That person must have had enough of living. Although these people were fugitives, they still wanted to live when they could. After the vehicles stopped, the people in the 3 vehicles immediately climbed out and hid on the other side of the vehicles to avoid the bullets. Jiang Hai's machine gun also swept over the vehicles. The glass of these vehicles was all gone. Feeling the glass shards falling like rain above their heads, these people were a little confused. Are you kidding me? What kind of firepower is this? Is this bullshit? The person in charge of the attack with a small pistol in his hand, a guy with a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks, said with a look of disbelief. He felt as if he was in Africa. Perhaps even Africa was not as chaotic as this. And just as he was muttering there, Jiang Hai also finished his bullets. He had no choice but to retreat and reload. Feeling that the firepower outside had stopped, these people also heaved a sigh of relief. These cars were all standard commercial vehicles with 8 seats. Each car had 8 people in it, which was a total of 40 people. 2 of the vehicles had flipped over, and now there were only 24 people left. These 24 people were not to be trifled with. As soon as they saw that the firepower outside had stopped, they immediately wanted to rush out. They were now about 200 meters away from Jiang Hai's villa. If they were to shoot with pistols at this distance, they would really be shooting handguns. Who knew where they would fly to? The pistol only had an attack range of 50 meters, while Jiang Hai's M134 had an attack range of 300 to 2,500 meters. Therefore, if they wanted to destroy Jiang Hai, the first thing they had to do was to shorten the distance. In fact, if they drove, they would be able to cover 200 meters in a flash. However, the problem now was that they didn't dare to drive, so they could only run. However, this was the end of this bold person's life. The moment his head popped out, there was a loud bang. The guy's head exploded like a ripe watermelon hit by a baseball bat. Needless to say, the only person with such firepower was Bale. Wow, 10 points. Not bad. Although he had turned over a new leaf, Bale used to be a butcher whose hands were stained with blood. When he killed people, he didn't feel guilty or anything. In the past, he killed people for missions and for the country, so he might feel that it was unreal. But now he killed people for the manor. He liked this job very much. He liked Jiang Hai. He liked this job. Of course, he liked the bonus that Jiang Hai gave him the most. In the whole of America, no, in the whole world, which cowboy could earn tens of thousands of dollars a year? Was there any cowboy who could give out $200,000 in a single bonus? He had killed so many people in the Triangle State for so many years, but he had only earned a few $1,000s as a reward. However, with Jiang Hai, he could get everything back. Most importantly, he could do what he liked the most. To him, this place was like heaven. There's a sniper too. Damn, which army is this? Looking at the headless bodies around them, these people were a little dumbfounded. How could they play like this? There was a heavy machine gun and a sniper. How could they have fun like this? At that moment, Jiang Hai reloaded his gun and used the suppressive fire. He already liked this kind of violent aesthetic feeling, while he was displaying his powerful firepower. On the other side of the 2 overturned cars, a door was slowly opened. Some people who had been hit by the cars crawled out. After taking a few deep breaths, they crawled towards Jiang Hai from the grass. At the same time they counted. In the 2 cars that Jiang Hai had overturned, there were a total of 16 people. But now, only 12 people had crawled out. The drivers of the 2 cars were dead. One was killed by Jiang Hai's machine gun, and the other was killed by the glass that popped out after the car overturned. The glass shards pierced into the arteries. If they called an ambulance now, they might be saved. However, the problem was that they couldn't call an ambulance now, so they could only wait for death. As for the remaining 2 people, they were behind the driver of the first car. Not only could the glass of the business car not block bullets, but even the seats and the human body could not block them. Jiang Hai's bullets pierced through 3 people before they died. Although 4 people died, now was not the time to be sad. Their mission was not completed yet. As soon as they moved, Goldie and Xiaobai had already reacted. They stood up quietly and slipped into the darkness. Not long after, they had quietly rushed towards the people over there. These people originally thought that Jiang Hai's attention on the main battlefield had been attracted by the people in the other 3 cars. They didn't expect that 2 monsters had already entered their hunting ground. The distance between them was slowly shrinking as they hid. 200 meters, 190 meters, 180 meters. When they were 150 meters away, 2 black shadows flashed in the darkness. The 2 people in front didn't even have time to call for help before they were pushed down. The moment they were pushed down, Goldie and Xiaohei's teeth had already bitten the throats of the 2 people. Someone had done a test before. The bite force of crocodiles was ranked in the top 3 in the world. It was the Gulf crocodile, the Nile crocodile, and the alligator. The 4th was the spotted hunting dog with a bite force of 585 kilograms. Jiang Hai's Goldie and Xiaobai were not hunting dogs. However, after such a long time, with the nourishment of Jiang Hai's spirit energy, it was not impossible for these 2 guys to dominate the grassland in Africa, let alone hunting dogs. In an instant, a few bloody holes appeared in the throats of these 2 people. They unwillingly spat out blood and fell into a pool of blood. The situation of these 2 people attracted the attention of the people behind them. "Ah, there's something in the bushes." Seeing that 2 people had died, the 3rd person immediately shouted. Then, he immediately took out his gun and prepared to shoot. However, Goldie and Xiaobai instantly burrowed into the bushes. They were not stupid now. Their goal was to take a bite and leave. This noise also attracted the attention of Jiang Hai and the others. Immediately, Robbins Garcia and the others aimed the weapons in their hands at this side. Without saying a word, they pulled the triggers. Although they were using shotguns, the effective range of their shots was about the same as a handgun. Now that they were so far away, it was not wrong to say that they were shooting randomly. However, on the battlefield, the bullets that were aimed were sometimes not too fatal. Some random stray bullets were the most fatal. Therefore, these people immediately lay down when they heard the gunshots. However, this gave Xiaobai and Goldie another opportunity. Without saying a word, they circled behind these people. The 2 dogs attacked again and bit the throats of the last 2 people. In the blink of an eye, these 2 guys had killed 4 people. Jiang Hai had only killed 4 people up until now, while Bale had only killed 1. This was a remarkable result. Charge or we're dead meat. Sensing that 2 more lives were slowly fading away, the second in command whispered to the person in charge. The person in charge thought about it and agreed. If they did not leave now, they would all die. Bend over and charge. When he thought of this, the person in charge gave the order. The people around him quickly bent over and rushed towards Jiang Hai. Once they moved, Xiaobai and Goldie would not be able to make a move. However, the commotion still attracted Jiang Hai and Bale's attention. Jiang Hai still had to suppress the people in front, but Bale was much more relaxed. He immediately adjusted his aim and looked at the people aiming at their waists. They were really good people. With a crisp sound, the leader fell into a pool of blood. There was a wrist-sized hole in his chest. When they saw this, the remaining 9 people could not help but quicken their pace. If they did not charge, they were dead meat. A distance of 100 meters, if they ran normally, would only take 11 or 12 seconds. If they could run within 10 seconds, they would be qualified to participate in the Olympics. When they bent over, the time increased to 15 or 16 seconds. This also gave Bale a lot of opportunities. When he pulled the leash, aimed and fired, Bale's attack was smooth. When these people were 50 meters away, where their pistols could be used, there were only 3 people left. When these 3 people came out of the bushes, Luo Binsi and the others aimed their weapons at them. Bang, 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 bang. Continuous gunshots rang out. These people helplessly fell into a pool of blood. They never thought that Jiang Hai would have so many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Not only did he have a heavy machine gun, but he also had a sniper. Not to mention these stragglers. Even if the real police came, It would be a fool's dream to take down this manor without using heavy weapons. Bastard, Henry and the others have been wiped out. The scene of the last 3 people falling down was clearly seen by the person who had been hiding behind the car. This person couldn't help but hit the cardboard. He was really a little confused. 2/5 of their strength was lost here just like that. Most importantly, according to the current situation, it was very likely that the remaining 3/5 of their strength would be very difficult to escape. Now they were really in a dilemma. There was a heavy machine gun and a sniper rifle. If they retreated, it was still the heavy machine gun and the sniper rifle. What should they do? Chapter 410. What should we do? What should we do? Feeling the bullets flying over their heads, the remaining 23 people looked anxiously at their leader and asked loudly. Now they couldn't advance or retreat. The other side could hit them, but they couldn't hit the other side. If they continued like this, then the police would come. At that time, the people on their side would really die. Intending to use force to destroy private property, murder charges could be said to be set on the board. Thinking of Jiang Hai's financial resources, if they went in, they would probably never be able to get out. As mentioned before, although these people were desperados, they didn't really want to die. In such a situation, they were really helpless. Hearing his words, the person who was asked had faint sweat on his forehead. He glanced at his watch and took a long breath. Hold on a little longer. Hold on for 10 more minutes. After saying this to the person next to him, the man said with a cold face. On the other side, Jiang Hai had finished the 2nd bullet belt at this time. He couldn't help but start to load the 3rd bullet belt. In the movies, it's said that a casual shot can make a car explode. I've already loaded so many bullets, the car won't explode. While loading the bullets, Jiang Hai said helplessly. Indeed, whether it was a movie or a TV series, the car would explode with a gunshot. But Jiang Hai has now asked for 200 bullets. Not to mention the car, there wasn't even a flame. In fact, a long time ago, someone had already done an experiment. Almost 99% of the bullets hitting a car wouldn't explode. In order to make a car explode, a total of 3 conditions must be met. First, the bullets must be shot into the fuel tank. Second, the bullets must rub against each other and cause an open flame. Third, the bullets must explode. Facts proved that it was not easy to meet these 3 conditions. The cars these people drove were all GMC business cars. This kind of car was also used as a police car in the police station. Its protective ability was quite good, especially the outside tendons. Although Jiang Hai's machine gun could penetrate the outermost tendon, it couldn't penetrate the inside. It was really not an easy thing to shoot into the fuel tank. Secondly, igniting an open flame was also very difficult. When the bullet was shot at high speed, it would not ignite an open flame when it pierced into metal. This included the walls of the fuel tank. If an experiment was done, it would be discovered that the bullets could penetrate the fuel tank and let the oil flow out. However, it was almost impossible to ignite an open flame. The only way was to use 2 bullets in one hole and let the bullets collide with each other inside the fuel tank. However, Jiang Hai was not using a sniper rifle. How could he get an open flame so easily? Thirdly, even if there was an open flame, it was basically impossible for it to explode. It was possible for it to burn, but explode? Hee. Therefore, Jiang Hai didn't want to blow up the car. It wasn't realistic. After sitting down and reloading, Jiang Hai picked up the gun again. But this time he didn't rush to shoot. There was no point in shooting at this time. The other party was hiding too well. They didn't shoot now, because they were waiting for them to come out. They would kill them when they came out. However, the other party was no fool. Why would he come out at this time? Was he courting death? Moreover, Jiang Hai had run out of bullets. There was still a sniper in the car, okay? Compared to Jiang Hai, the sniper was more dangerous. The scene was in a deadlock for a while. Only the police outside and the gangsters were still fighting fiercely. As time passed by, Jiang Hai and the others relaxed. This was because they got the latest news that the police in Boston had broken through the roadblock. They would arrive in about half an hour. As long as they could hold on for half an hour, these people would die. Bang! Just as Jiang Hai and the others were preparing to go all out to deal with this half an hour, suddenly, a gunshot came from the villa. As soon as he heard this gunshot, Jiang Hai's heart thumped. He cursed in his heart. He immediately turned his head. Sure enough, the window of his room had been broken by a gunshot, and his room was where Daliana and the others were hiding. As for the other party, when they heard this gunshot, they couldn't help but laugh proudly. They knew that they had succeeded. Bell! Jiang Hai shouted, and was ready to go back to the villa. But unfortunately, these people outside did not give him such an opportunity. Just as Jiang Hai was about to leave, these 23 people directly rushed out and rushed toward Jiang Hai's villa. Boss, I'll go. After immediately shooting 2 people, Bell put away his weapon and shouted at Jiang Hai below. Compared to suppressive fire, his sniper rifle was not as good as Jiang Hai's M134. Hearing his words, although Jiang Hai was anxious, he still decided to fight head-on. If both sides were not pleasing, then it would be really troublesome. In a flash, he left the hiding place. Jiang Hai also swept toward these people in front of him. In an instant, among the 21 people who were still alive, 6 of them were swept down by Jiang Hai and fell in a pool of blood forever. However, the remaining 15 people's reactions were not slow. They immediately lay down and continued to move toward Jiang Hai. If there was a sniper rifle now, then they would all be targets. But the problem now was that there was no sniper rifle. Daimu damn English. Looking at the situation of these guys, he was still worried about Jiang Hai in the villa. He decided to change his strategy. Picking up his August, Jiang Hai jumped to the rain shield on the first floor and began to pull the trigger. But the problem was that his August could indeed see the other party, but it was a semi-automatic weapon. The attack power was really a problem. After 5 bullets were fired, he had to change the magazine. When the other party heard Jiang Hai's gunshot, they also knew that this was an opportunity. As soon as the man gave the order, the person who was originally lying on the ground instantly jumped up and rushed towards Jiang Hai's side. Looking at these people rushing over, Luo Binsi and others understood that the real difficult battle had just begun. On the other side, in the villa, the atmosphere was a bit strange. These people did invade Jiang Hai's home. There were a total of 6 people who invaded. These people parked their cars on the other side of Jiang Hai's manor. After the battle here began, they quietly sneaked in. They sneaked into Jiang Hai's villa, and then blocked the women of Jiang Hai, who were paying attention to the battle below. According to their original plan, after capturing these women, they would force Jiang Hai to negotiate. But they did not expect that the current situation was not as easy as they thought, because it seemed that they had an internal strife. Knurson Peters, don't let me say it again. Come here immediately. Looking at the big man standing in front of this group of women, a man who was blind in one eye roared with a gloomy face. At this time, these 6 people were clearly divided into 2 groups. 5 people on one side were holding pistols in their hands, and opposite them was a 2-meter-tall big man with a gun in his hand, aiming at these people in front of him. Behind this big man were Delina, Marion, Aphrodite, Bernice, Littleya, and 9 other girls. This group of girls was scared at this time. They looked at the situation in front of them with an incredible face. They did not know what to do. Run! The big man looked at the people in front of him and said to the girls behind him without looking back. Fortunately, Delina and the others were not good people before. Although they were nervous at this time, they were still able to talk. They slowly moved to the door according to the big man's words. Seeing that these people were about to run, the one-eyed man's eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. Open fire! Along with the one-eyed man's order, the 5 pistols instantly opened fire. However, this big guy actually managed to block the 5 pistols, causing his body to explode with blood. However, his blocking gave Deliana and the others the opportunity to escape from Jiang Hai's room. Seeing Deliana and the others running away, the one-eyed man couldn't help but gnash his teeth in anger. Chase! Bang! Just when the 5 of them were about to chase after them, the big man who was lying on the ground suddenly opened fire and directly shot one of them in the chest. Seeing that the big man was still alive, the one-eyed man's face couldn't help but turn green. The remaining 4 people instantly rushed to the side to avoid the bullets. "You 3 go and deal with the women below. I will deal with him." Looking at the big guy struggling to get up again, the killing intent in the one-eyed man's eyes became more intense. He said to the 3 men beside him. Hearing his words, the 3 men didn't say anything and directly went out of the room. Just when the big guy was attracted by the 3 men, the one-eyed man had already stood up. Bang bang! 2 consecutive sounds were heard. 2 blood flowers respectively appeared on the right shoulder and right leg of the big man. The pistol in his right hand was also instantly knocked away. At the same time, the big man's body trembled and he half knelt on the ground. "Connerson Peters, to be honest, I originally appreciated you very much. You are big, brave, and tough, but you actually betrayed us at this time. You are courting death." Looking at the big man's appearance, the one-eyed man walked over with a gloomy face. Although this big man didn't join them for a long time, everyone in the gang actually liked this guy very much. He didn't do too many bad things, wasn't greedy for money, and wasn't greedy for women. He was tough and wouldn't discount any mission. Such a person was indeed the best lackey in the eyes of the higher-ups. Unfortunately, this lackey had broken his teeth today. "This is the home of my benefactor. I won't let you succeed." Clutching his bleeding wound, Connerson Peters' face was ghastly pale, but his eyes were still fixed on the one-eyed man, his eyes full of killing intent. "Unfortunately, you won't be able to see it." Hearing the words of the big man, the one-eyed man came over and pointed the pistol directly at his head. His eyes were full of viciousness as he spoke. Connerson Peters sighed. If he had known that this was the home of his benefactor, he might have come earlier. If he had joined, perhaps the result would have been different. "It seems that the favor of saving my life will have to be repaid in the next life." Thinking of this, Conrad closed his eyes. At this moment, bang. Chapter 411. Where are we going now? Outside? After escaping from the room, Bernice pulled Xiaoya and asked with a pale face. She really didn't expect that she would encounter such an unexpected disaster while living in Jianghai's place. Who could she find to reason with? "No, there is also a war outside. Come with me." Hearing her words, Aphrodite, who was running in front, hesitated for a moment, then gritted her teeth. She felt that she was the only one in this room who can help. "Where are we going?" Hearing that Aphrodite wasn't going to go outside, although Bernice was a little surprised, she still ran with her. But this time Aphrodite didn't answer her. After coming to the first floor, she ran straight to a warehouse. In the surprised eyes of Bernice and the others, a bright room appeared in their sight. In this room, there was a bathroom, a water system, and in addition, there was an iron cage with a woman inside. This woman was sitting on the bed reading a book at this time. Seeing their arrival, the woman was a little stunned. "I was wondering why you didn't come to deliver food tonight, you guys. What's the situation?" Looking at Aphrodite in front of her, the woman closed the book and said to Aphrodite with a smile on her face, but looking at their panicked appearance, she was a little puzzled. "There's no way. This warehouse is too thick. She really can't hear the sound outside at all from inside. Someone invaded the manor. If they catch us, it will be very bad for Jianghai, so we need your help." Walking to the front of the iron cage, Aphrodite looked at the woman in front of her and said with a serious face, "She is." Bernice gently pulled Delina's sleeve from behind and asked curiously, "An agent Jianghai picked her up a while ago." Hearing her words, Delina actually didn't know much about this woman's details. She just heard Jianghai talk about her from time to time. She remembered that Jianghai said that this woman is very dangerous. Is it really okay to ask her for help? She is locked here. Doesn't it mean that she is very dangerous? She should have a hostile relationship with you. Hearing Delina's words, Bernice couldn't help but say anxiously, if they were friends, why would they be locked up? And from the looks of it, he had been locked up for quite some time. Sure, it depends on whether you believe me or not. As if she heard Bernice's words, the woman slowly stood up and said to Aphrodite. She then looked at Bernice provocatively. This woman was quite interesting. I believe you. Bernice hesitated for a moment, then took out a key and opened the door. As the door opened, the woman slowly walked out. Phew, the feeling of freedom. I don't really feel anything. The woman stretched lazily and smiled. Then in an instant, she hit Aphrodite with her elbow. Her speed was so fast that Aphrodite couldn't react at all. Just as she was regretting it, and feeling that she had invited a wolf into the house, the tip of the woman's elbow stopped at her forehead. I'm just teasing you. I'm very happy here. I have to thank you for taking care of me. Looking at Aphrodite's appearance, the woman chuckled, opened her elbow and turned it into a hand. After gently touching Aphrodite's head, she walked straight out of the warehouse. When she walked out of the warehouse, the three people just happened to catch up. Seeing her, the three people on this side opened fire. But unfortunately this woman, Azzalina Vicabrio, is not an ordinary person. Her reaction is much faster than these three people. She immediately shrank back and dodged their bullets. She casually picked up a few plates next to her and threw them aside after she finished eating. She began to count in her heart. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. Although she had only taken a quick glance, she had already memorized the model of the weapon used by these people. It was a Glock 18 without an additional magazine, which meant that it only had the most basic 17 rounds. Counting bullets is enough. She used to do this kind of work a lot in the past. When she counted to 13, she had already rushed out of the warehouse like a ghost. The three people on this side immediately turned their guns and began to attack her. However, Azzalina is not an ordinary person. These days, she has been eating and living well in Jiang Hai's house. She is also nourished by food with spiritual energy, so her current physical condition is much better than when she fought with Jiang Hai. Not only did she instantly lower her head to dodge the first round of bullets, but before the second round of bullets came, she had already stepped on the opposite wall. Then she flipped over and dodged the second round of attacks. Then she pressed down and dodged the third round of attacks. At this moment, the sound of the firing pin hitting the air was heard. It just happened that there were no more bullets. Seeing this, the corners of Azzalina's mouth couldn't help but twitch. The 3 plates in her hand instantly flew out. With 3 slapping sounds, the wrists of the 3 people were hit by Azzalina. The huge force caused a sharp pain in the wrists of the 3 people. In an instant, they couldn't hold the guns in their hands, and the pistols fell to the ground. At this time, Azzalina also flashed and appeared in front of them. She stepped on the ground and jumped high. Then, she directly hit the side of the cheek of the person in the middle, sending him flying to the person on the left. Not only did he fall, but he also pulled the person on the left down. Seeing this scene, the person on the right was stunned for a moment, but he was still ready to fight. But just as he took a step forward, Azzalina didn't stop in the air. Instead, she directly stepped on the wall on the other side and bounced back again. At the same time, a whip kick landed heavily on the person's face. In an instant, the person saw stars. He slammed into the wall and fell weakly. Now only the last person who had just stood up was left. Azzalina didn't say much. She turned around and flashed behind the person in an instant. She raised her hands and climbed directly onto the person's neck, not giving him any chance at all. She twisted her body like this. With a click, the person's neck was already tilted to the other side, and his body went limp. Although it was lively now, in fact, the exchange of gunfire between the 4 people happened in a flash. From the time Azzalina came out of the warehouse to the time the 3 people all fell, it took less than 5 seconds. Aphrodite and the others in the warehouse only heard a burst of noise before the outside quieted down. It's done. They're just some hooligans. After checking the situation of the 3 people again, 2 of them were already dead. The person who was hit first was still breathing, but a severe concussion was inevitable. After shouting at Aphrodite and the others inside, Azzalina also took out the guns of the other people. At the same time found the magazines on their bodies and reloaded them. Are there any more enemies? After adjusting the gun to the best state, Azzalina looked at Aphrodite and said with a serious face, "Yes, there are more outside, and there are more upstairs." Aphrodite heard her words and said with a serious face, "Don't move." Just as she finished speaking, there was a sound in Azzalina's ears. In an instant, she pointed her gun at the stairs, and a long gun stretched out from the stairs. But when the two sides saw each other, they were stunned for a moment. Then the long gun in the distance was put away first, revealing Belle Lester's face. Bale and Azalina had met before. In fact, the reason she was sent here was because Bale was the one who sent her away. It's done. Belle looked at the three people lying next to Azalina, and couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Well, it's also done upstairs. Hearing his words, Azalina also put away her gun and asked with a serious face. Well, it's done, but there are still a lot of people outside. If it's convenient, I'll have to trouble you to take care of them. Seeing Aphrodite and the others coming out of the warehouse, Belle put away his gun. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to trust this woman for the time being. When this woman heard what Belle said, she also nodded, indicating that it doesn't matter. By the way, there is still a big guy upstairs. You are a doctor, right? Go and see him, he is with us. Seeing that Azalina had agreed, Belle was about to leave, but before he left, he suddenly remembered something and said to Bernice, who had just walked out with a frightened look on her face. Then, he quickly ran up to the second floor. He wanted to go to the roof and continue attacking. Just now, when he just came down, he just happened to see the final confrontation between the one-eyed man and the big guy. He subconsciously opened fire and killed the one-eyed man who was holding the gun. As for the big guy, after telling him that he was going to save the other girls, he fainted. After all, he had been hit by more than 10 bullets. Although they didn't hit any vital parts, it was still hard to explain why he didn't faint. Oh, Hearing Belle's words, Bernice froze for a moment before reacting. Indeed, if it wasn't for the big guy just now, they would have died. So when she heard that the big guy was in trouble, she should also do her duty. So she immediately went upstairs and looked at the big guy who had lost too much blood and was in shock. Everyone was also busy. Fortunately, Jiang Hai cherished his life very much. In addition to not being able to perform surgery, he almost had all kinds of medicine, so temporarily stabilizing his condition was not a problem. As long as the people outside were repelled, they could use a helicopter to send him for treatment. And Azalina, at this time, also came to the second floor. This was the first time she observed Jiang Hai's villa, and it was really good. As for Belle on the other side, he quickly climbed to the top of the bed. When he came up, the distance between the two sides was only about 30 meters. Jiang Hai and the others were now hiding behind the car, shooting with pistols and shotguns. And the other side seemed to be very confident in the people who attacked the villa. They only shot back and didn't attack forward. This was a good opportunity. Chapter 412. Setting up the gun, reloading and aiming. Bale's movements were done in one go. He had trained himself to be a killing machine in the Delta, and now he was able to use it freely. When he put the crosshairs with night vision goggles on those people, death came. Bang! A person who was attacking Jiang Hai's manor had a look of disbelief on his face as he looked at the bloody hole in his chest. His face was filled with confusion as he went limp. The person beside him was also filled with shock. They were shocked not because one of their companions died, but because the sniper came back. Just now, they clearly heard Jiang Hai ask the sniper to deal with the enemies in the villa. Now that the sniper came back, and the people in the villa were silent, there was no need to say more. The people in the villa were finished. Without backup, they were finished. Thinking of this, these people suddenly felt a chill down their spine. They looked at each other and saw a trace of fear in each other's eyes. Run! No one knew who said it first, but many people gave up the idea of continuing to fight at this time. They were really ready to run, but could they run? With the sound of the sniper rifle again, another person fell in a pool of blood, and this gunshot was like a starting gun, making the others rush in all directions in an instant. These people may be third-rate in fighting, but when it came to running, they were all experts. They knew that now they couldn't run in a straight line. They had to run separately. Maybe 2 of them could escape. The 11 people who were still alive scattered in an instant, running in 11 directions. But just as they ran out of the bunker, the shotguns began to play their role. There was almost no need to aim with the shotguns. They just needed to look at the approximate position and shoot. Among the 11 people, 5 of them were shot to the ground by these shotguns. There were 6 people who escaped quickly, but they were also targeted by Jiang Hai and Bale. Under the heavy fire of the sniper rifle and machine gun, Jiang Hai wiped out 3 people at once, and Bale also killed 1. Only 2 of the 6 people escaped into the grass in the distance. But Jiang Hai was not worried, because there were still their reinforcements there. Sure enough, with a dog's bark, 2 people's screams sounded in the grass. At this point, all the people who attacked Jiang Hai's manor were killed. Looking at the outer wall of his villa, which was full of bullet holes, and his car, Jiang Hai's heart was bleeding. Needless to say, his loss this time was not small, and the most important thing was that he probably had to pay for these losses. These people certainly didn't have the money to pay, and the insurance company couldn't pay for Jiang Hai's injuries. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai estimated that this time, he would have to pay a lot of money, but compared to the losses he would suffer if he didn't resist, and the importance of the people in his manor, these were not a problem. Phew, let's talk about the inventory tomorrow. We need to deal with the guys outside now. With a long sigh, Jiang Hai patted Moses Adams, who was not far from him. Although Moses Adams was a man who couldn't carry anything, he was still a man after all, so Jiang Hai originally asked him to hide in the villa. As a result, he deliberately came outside and found a small pistol to fight with him. Although he didn't kill anyone and shot a dozen bullets there, Jiang Hai still appreciated such a person who was willing to go through thick and thin with him. I won't go. Feeling his weak body, Moses Adams said with a wry smile. Just stay here and be obedient. Looking at him, Jiang Hai smiled and said hello to Belle upstairs. After the two came down, they started the only car that could still move, Jiang Hai's car, and rushed to the airport. After arriving at the airport, Jiang Hai and Belle got on Marin Rupert's helicopter, took off, and headed outside the manor. On the helicopter, Jiang Hai had already set up a fixed machine gun rack. To be honest, after firing nearly 500 bullets, even if Jiang Hai's physical fitness was really strong, some of his muscles were now trembling. The recoil of this thing was too strong. It was so strong that Jiang Hai felt like he couldn't withstand it. As the helicopter flew out of the manor, the police and the bad guys outside were all dumbfounded, especially the bad guys. When Jiang Hai opened the door of the helicopter and revealed the M134 Doyle George, who was hiding behind the police car at this time, couldn't help but laugh. He knew that they would win even without backup. Tut 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 tut. In an instant the 7.62mm bullets became an eternal sound in this space. The people below didn't expect to be attacked from the sky at all. Even if these people hid in the car, it was useless. The defense on the side of the car couldn't withstand the M134 strafing, let alone the alloy on the roof. As the bullets continued to pour down, these people who originally agreed to fake the fight were completely dumbfounded. They watched as their companions were shot into sieves by the bullets from the helicopter in front of them. Many people wanted to run at this time, but could they run? Don't forget, there was still Belle. As long as these people sat in the driver's seat, Belle would reward the person in the driver's seat with a bullet. As blood flowed, screams sounded one after another in front of Jiang Hai's manor. The Americans were never stubborn people. In the past, when they were fighting, there were people who surrendered in groups. Now it was the same. Seeing that they couldn't win, many people took the initiative to kneel on the ground, put their hands on their heads, and surrendered. Although Jiang Hai really wanted to kill these people, Belle, who was behind him, pulled him back. The law of the United States clearly stated that when the other person didn't threaten or have the will to fight, as long as they killed someone, even if it was in self-defense, it was still murder. There were many police officers here. These people wouldn't say anything, but it didn't mean that these police officers were on the same side as Jiang Hai. Therefore, they would do what they should do, and they couldn't do what they shouldn't do. Of course, after these people went in, whether they could come out alive depended on Jiang Hai's mood. Seeing that the battle was over, Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief and returned to his manor by plane. When he returned to the manor, the police in Winthrop had already broken through the roadblocks and arrested most of the people blocking the road. The remaining police cars were sent to the manor, With the addition of these police cars, all the people who had surrendered were taken away. Then the police began to clean up the manor. A total of 46 people invaded Jiang Hai's manor. Of these 46 people, 41 were dead. There were still 5 people alive, including the one who let Delina and the others go. When Jiang Hai saw this big guy, he remembered that this guy should be the big guy he met in Miami. He had even invited him to eat hamburgers before. But he didn't know why this big guy would come here. However, he also listened to Delina's words. If it wasn't for this big guy, they would have been done for. Although Jiang Hai hated these people who invaded his manor, he was not a person who would bite the hand that fed him. This person helped him. So Jiang Hai sent him to the hospital in Boston in his helicopter. Of course, the Boston police also went with him. As for the other 4 people who were still alive, they were not treated so well. After the ambulance arrived, their wounds were simply treated, and they were directly taken back to the Winthrop police station. They had no human rights or freedom here. If they didn't die immediately after breaking into someone's house with a gun, then they could only wait and see. There should be a priority for everything. Winthrop and Jiang Hai's manor had just been solved. There was also news from Boston. The Boston police immediately dispatched and sealed off the area where Billy Wallen was. They must not let this guy escape. Once there was evidence, they would immediately arrest him. This was inevitable. Jiang Hai's house was temporarily uninhabitable. After arranging for everyone to stay in the small villa where Aphrodite and the others lived for a night, Jiang Hai also took Moses Adams to the Winthrop police station. Of course, Jiang Hai did not lock up Azalina, who had made a great contribution this time. Instead, he let her go with Aphrodite and the others. Jiang Hai did not have any restrictions on her. If she wanted to leave now, she could leave. Originally, Jiang Hai was in a dilemma, whether to lock her up at home or not. Now that she saved Delina and the others' lives, Jiang Hai did not need to be in a dilemma. He would just give her back her freedom. However, Azalina did not seem to want to leave. They stayed in the police station for a night. Of course, Jiang Hai's treatment was naturally different from those people. After Jiang Hai made a simple statement, he was assigned to an office and slept there. Although he only slept on the sofa, he was obviously the most comfortable in the entire police station. Even Moses Adams, who came with him, only slept for 3 hours. He had a lot of things to do. Although he did not help much during the battle, he also proved his position. Therefore, Jiang Hai handed over all the work to him, including counting the losses, monitoring the interrogation records, and finding the details of these people. In Boston, since Jiang Hai could not solve it with money, he could only find a way to solve it himself. If people did not offend him, he basically would not offend them. But if people offended him, then he would kill their whole family. Don't say that the children were innocent. The women were innocent, and their parents were innocent. In Jiang Hai's view, it was normal for his whole family to be buried with him when he committed a crime, especially when it was him who was the one who offended him. Although he was mentally prepared, when Moses Adams sent the information the next day, he could not help but frown. Chapter 413. The exterior walls of the villa need to be cleaned up. The parking lot needs to be cleaned up. The lawn needs to be cleaned up. And all the cars need to be repaired. 6 of them are scrapped Philemon Turner's cars. The windows in the house are broken. The lawn is seriously polluted. And a lot of the barbed wire on the exterior walls have been knocked down. Everything in the rooms has been destroyed. Jiang Hai couldn't help but slap his forehead. Last night, he had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in compensation. No, if the villa was renovated, it might cost millions of dollars. This was pure compensation, and the insurance company wouldn't pay for it. Generally speaking, the insurance company would only pay for the villa if it caught fire, was stolen, or exploded. Even if a meteorite fell from the sky and smashed the villa, the insurance company would still pay for it, because it was a natural disaster. But the insurance company wouldn't pay for the villa that was attacked and beaten up like this, because Jiang Hai had caught the people who attacked his manor. Logically speaking, these people should pay for it. But it was obvious that these people would pay for it. After all, after they went in, Jiang Hai wouldn't let them come out alive. Besides, they didn't have the money to pay for it. Jiang Hai couldn't do anything about it except scold them. Of course, he probably wouldn't be insured again next year, because of these fraudulent foreign insurance companies. The only money that could be paid for was the repair of Jiang Hai's cars, because the cars had gun insurance. There was nothing else. Jiang Hai had to pay for it himself. Also, they had fought together last night. Jiang Hai was very touched. He gave each of them $200,000, which had been given before the battle. It could be considered a settlement allowance. If anything happened, he would naturally give them more money. But now that nobody was hurt, Jiang Hai could save the rest of the money. Jiang Hai didn't care about the money. He could earn millions of dollars back by killing dozens of cows. But he was really angry. Why did he have to suffer such an unexpected disaster? Millions of dollars were nothing to him. These guys attacked his manor. Who did he offend? Have you investigated these guys? I'm going to kill them all. Sitting on the sofa in the police station, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Listening to Jiang Hai's words and looking at his sharp eyes, Moses Adams shrugged. Needless to say, there are many people who want to kill them all. But unfortunately, this guy is very careful. This time, other than the core members and desperados, no one received his call personally. All the gangsters who were caught were interrogated by the Winthrop and Boston police. They all came with the core members, and most of these core members died in your hands. Only 4 survived, and they are the only people who might know the situation. But these 4 people didn't say anything. Moses Adams hesitated for a moment as he looked at Jiang Hai. The current situation is indeed a little troublesome. After all, in this world there was law everywhere. Now that someone was prepared to fight to the death, the police couldn't do anything about it. Give me their information, I'll take a look. But this didn't apply to Jiang Hai. He didn't play by the rules. If the other party didn't play by the rules, he wouldn't play by the rules. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams immediately found the information of the 4 people and handed it to Jiang Hai. With the information of the 4 people, Jiang Hai pushed open the door and walked out. Last night, the Winthrop police station was very impressive, especially Doyle George and the others, who were on the front line and didn't take a step back. As a result, 3 police officers were injured. Fortunately, no one died, which was a great fortune amidst the misfortune. So after taking the statements last night, Jiang Hai donated $3 million to the police station. He donated $50,000 to each of the 3 injured police officers. Of course, it wasn't through the accounts, which meant that the $50,000 could be directly stuffed into their pockets without paying taxes. It was because of the $3,150,000 that everyone in the police station now looked at Jiang Hai more warmly than they did at Murray Smith. Many people were wondering why they weren't the ones who were injured back then. $50,000. Only a middle-class family in the United States could earn $50,000. Although the police's salary wasn't low, it wasn't high either. They got more than a year's salary for no reason, and they didn't have to pay taxes. Just thinking about it made them very happy. Faced with this god of wealth, Jiang Hai, they were now truly loyal. When they saw Jiang Hai come out, they all looked at Jiang Hai kindly and nodded with smiles. After Jiang Hai nodded back at them, he walked into the interrogation room. At that moment, it was already the 3rd wave of police officers interrogating these people in the interrogation room. Because all the peaceful countries in the world were basically the same, the interrogation had to be videotaped, so there was no way to beat people up or torture them to get a confession. The only way was to bombard them with fatigue, not letting them sleep at all, and then keep asking simple questions. If they didn't answer, they could wake them up with water, but they wouldn't let them sleep. These people were all felons with evidence. Firstly, they definitely wouldn't be allowed to be released on bail. Secondly, there was no humane law. They could be locked up here for 15 days. If you had the ability, you could go without sleep for 15 days. People definitely couldn't take it. However, Jiang Hai couldn't stand waiting here for 15 days. Therefore, after he greeted Murray Smith, who was watching over here, he walked into one of the interrogation rooms. When the police officer in the interrogation room saw Jiang Hai, He stood up. Although he was still very respectful to Jiang Hai, there was some surprise in his eyes. This was because he thought that Jiang Hai was here to beat people up. If that was the case, it would be difficult for them. If a criminal died in the police station, regardless of whether the criminal had committed a heinous crime, it would definitely cause a storm in the United States, where human life was more important than the sky. Therefore, he was really afraid that Jiang Hai would make a move. However, Jiang Hai wasn't a brainless person. He knew that he couldn't make a move in the police station. Even if he had a close relationship with the police station, he couldn't. Therefore, from the beginning, he didn't plan to make a move. Standing in front of the table, Jiang Hai glanced at the man in front of him. This man was one of the 46 people who attacked Jiang Hai's house yesterday. He was also the one with the least injury. This man was hit by Azalina Vicabrio and knocked into his companion. He had a severe concussion, but it wasn't fatal. Other than that, there were almost no internal injuries on his body. A concussion was actually a very disgusting injury. If it was mild, it would be nausea and confusion, just like cervical spondylosis. If it was severe, in addition to nausea and confusion, there would also be severe head pain. However, this guy was also a tough guy. He endured the headache and sat there for so long. Although his face was pale, he didn't say a word. Glancing at the two policemen, Jiang Hai motioned for them to leave first. After hesitating for a while, the two also left. After they left, Jiang Hai sat in front of the man. Moses Adams cleverly came to the front of the camera. Although the picture was still on, he pressed the microphone. The recording continued, but no sound could be heard. "Your name is Camilla March?" Looking at the information in his hand, Jiang Hai said calmly. However, when the other party heard Jiang Hai's words, he didn't answer him. He was still sitting there indifferently motionless, not speaking. "Oh, you don't have to answer. I just came over to talk to you. You attacked my house, and you know that I'm very rich. So 15 days later, no matter what sentence you will be sentenced to, it will be better if it's the death penalty. But if you go to prison, you will die a much more painful death. Of course, I know that you should be prepared for this. But according to my information, you also have a mother, 2 sons, and a daughter. TSK. What do you mean?" Hearing Jiang Hai's threat, the man named Camilla March didn't waver. He knew that he couldn't escape death. A guy like Jiang Hai is obviously not a good person. He will certainly not let them go. But when Jiang Hai talked about his family, the man panicked. "You attacked my manor and attacked my family. So, I'm going to kill your whole family." Looking at Camilla March in front of him, Jiang Hai said indifferently, as if he was just saying that he drank a glass of milk this morning. "You can't do this, they are innocent." Hearing that Jiang Hai is really going to kill his whole family, Camilla March instantly slammed his hands on the table and said with a horrified face, "Although Americans have a very weak concept of family, people like him can't keep their wives. They are constantly changing, but their blood-related family is their spiritual support." Now Jiang Hai casually said that he will kill his family. He knows that Jiang Hai is not threatening him, nor is he joking. He will really do it. The law of the United States can't judge a demon like him. "Innocent? Don't say this word in front of me. When you attacked me, wasn't I innocent? Weren't the people in my manor innocent? I can only say that you are in a hurry. Attacking me, I will kill your whole family. It's very fair." Clasping his hands, Jiang Hai said very indifferently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man couldn't help but be speechless because he really didn't know what to say. "Ask me. I'll tell you what I want to know. Please let them go." He knows that if he wants his family to survive now, his life alone is not enough. He must say something. "No, I'm not a police officer. I know your boss is Billy Wallen. I'll find him personally and kill his entire family. I'm here to tell you that I'll kill your entire family too. That's all." Gently knocking on the table, Jiang Hai said very indifferently. Then he stood up and shook his head at Moses Adams. The two walked out of the interrogation room. Chapter 414. "No, you can't do this. I'll tell you whatever you want to ask, please, please. They are innocent, please, please come back. I'll tell you whatever you want to ask. Please don't do anything to them. Police, police, come and ask me. I'll tell you everything. Please protect my family, please. Looking at Jiang Hai's firm and determined steps, the man named Camilla March struggled to stand up and stop Jiang Hai. But unfortunately, his hands and feet were handcuffed to the fixed chair, and it was difficult to move, let alone stand up. Although his hands and feet were bruised, he continued to shout as if he felt nothing. Seeing that his request could not move Jiang Hai's heart of stone, he called the police. For him, the only person he could trust now was the police, his former biggest enemy. Jiang, your trick is really useful, Moses Adams said with a chuckle as he closed the door of the interrogation room again. The wicked will be punished by the wicked. Jiang Hai's "I'll kill your whole family" was really a heavy blow, and it was really useful. You think I'm joking? No, I'm serious. But listening to Moses Adams's words, Jiang Hai laughed at himself. He would not joke about such things. Then he walked into the other 3 interrogation rooms. Except for one stubborn person, who still did not say a word, the other 2 people were at a loss, shouting for Jiang Hai to let them go. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai was really going to kill their whole families. The people outside who accompanied the attack and blocked the road all deserved to die, but Jiang Hai had no way to kill their whole families. And Jiang Hai would not let these people go, because he also wanted to show his existence. He was not to be trifled with. But how to deal with these people? Jiang Hai had some problems. With so many people, it was impossible for him to deal with them one by one. It was too troublesome. And he could not fly to Miami and spend money to find some people to come back to Boston to do these things. Not to mention whether it would make a big deal out of it. Just going back and forth was very troublesome. So Jiang Hai was also a little hesitant. After coming out of the 4 interrogation rooms, the police took over their work again. This time, their work efficiency was really fast. Soon, they found out the specific situation. Their boss was Billy Wallen, and it was also Billy who ordered the attack on Jiang Hai. In addition, Billy Wallen was also involved in gambling, flour, and other businesses. In order to protect their families, these people told him everything, which made the police very happy. Then, the police in Winthrop called the police in Boston. After the police in Boston received the news, they went out to arrest Billy Wallen, but the guy had already escaped. Then they sealed all his property and warehouses, and some of his shops, and seized a lot of flour and other things. Of course, these had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. He was still thinking about how to kill these people's whole families. After Jiang Hai finished his work at the police station, he took a taxi and returned to the manor with Moses Adams. After returning to the manor, Moses Adams went to help Jiang Hai solve some trivial matters. For example, the renovation of the manor, the maintenance of the vehicles, and so on. Jiang Hai returned to his villa, sat on the sofa in the empty living room, and sorted out his thoughts. Now his villa was empty because of last night. Daliana and Marion lived in Aphrodite's room, and Bernice and Littleya lived in Hilda Leonard and Peggy Hall's small villa. Of course, this was only temporary. When the villa was repaired, they would come back to live there. But these days, Jiang Hai still has no place to stay. Last night, he stayed in the police station, and he didn't know where to stay tonight. Although Jiang Hai's villa, except for the outer wall and his own room, was seriously damaged, other places were fine. Especially the guest rooms, the damage could be said to be almost zero. But now this villa was the crime scene of the police. Even if they didn't feel guilty, the guest rooms were not allowed to stay, so this was also a problem. Headache, what should I do? Rubbing his temples, Jiang Hai seemed to have not felt like this for a long time. Since he came here, his life has been very leisurely. Every day, in addition to eating, playing, or sleeping. Except for the fact that he didn't have a fixed girlfriend, he felt that his life was as beautiful as living in a dream. Now that he suddenly had so many things to do, he really felt that he couldn't handle it well. Not to mention the problem of sleeping, just the matter of revenge gave him a headache. If he didn't take revenge, the anger in Jiang Hai's heart would not be extinguished. But if he wanted to take revenge, how could he do it? Do it himself? What if he failed miserably? But if he spent money to find someone, there was no reliable person in Boston. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai really had a headache. Even if he wanted to trouble Belle, Jiang Hai couldn't say it. After all, the people he wanted to kill were not only Billy Wallen, but also the old, the weak, the women and the children. Bell Lester was a soldier, and he had a strong sense of justice. He definitely wouldn't do it. Jiang Hai didn't have to try. If he tried, it would be easy to distract him. Other than that, he had no other choice. What's wrong? Are you thinking about something? Just when Jiang Hai felt a little numb, a voice suddenly came from behind. This startled Jiang Hai. He immediately looked back and saw Azalina Vicabrio standing behind him. It's you. You haven't left yet. Thank you so much for last night. Seeing that it was her, Jiang Hai's body relaxed again. He continued to lean on the sofa, talking intermittently. You don't have to thank me. I was just saving myself. Besides, if I leave, it seems that I have nowhere to go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina moved her long legs, slowly walked to the sofa next to Jiang Hai, and then sat down. The world is big. There will always be a place for you. Jiang Hai also knew some of her situation. Now what else could he say? He could only comfort her. But then again, with her skills, it wouldn't be a problem for her to make a living anywhere. But I don't like to go out. Otherwise, what do you think of me? Shaking her head, Azalina suddenly looked at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was still a little confused. What does she mean? I know that you have been very troubled recently, and you also need a timely combat force. What do you think of me? It's not that I want to say this, but although I can't beat you in a fight, when it comes to close combat, your special forces subordinate is no match for me either. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina suddenly said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was confused. What is going on? In fact, people are very afraid of the unknown, and Azalina is the same. People live according to their habits. If it weren't for the fact that she would die if she didn't escape, she would probably still be in the original organization now. After escaping here, she stayed with Jiang Hai. To be honest, although she was locked in the warehouse, she felt very good. Here, there were no endless missions, no bloodthirsty lives, and no threats that could take your life at any time. There was also no need to scheme against others. There was good food, good drink, and a leisurely life, even though it didn't last long. But it had already made her a little fascinated. Now, if she went out to find a job, it would be better to stay with Jiang Hai. It was safe and leisurely. And most importantly, she believed that Jiang Hai must have a lot of things that he wanted her to help with. When I was 6 years old, I entered the KGB and began to learn fighting skills and firearms skills. When I was 12 years old, I completed my first mission independently. When I was 14, I began to learn the ability of spy missions. I know a lot of tricks to please men, although I haven't used them in actual combat. If you are willing to let me stay, these things are all yours. Seeing the look of desire in Jiang Hai's eyes, Azalina smiled and took the initiative to come closer. However, as soon as she came closer, Jiang Hai was startled, and his body involuntarily shrank back. What are you afraid of? It's not like you can't beat me. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Azalina chuckled, and then her whole body took the initiative to come closer. She had been educated differently from ordinary people since she was a child. In her world, her body was a weapon, her body was a tool, her body was a prop, her body was a media to complete the task, that's all. Now that she gave it to Jiang Hai, she didn't care, but Jiang Hai couldn't stand it. Although he could casually find some girls to play with outside, if Azalina really stayed, she would be one of his people. Although he was not born in the year of the rabbit, he had the nerves of a rabbit. First, he was timid, and second, he didn't eat the grass around him. Forget it. If you want to stay, then stay. There's no need to try. Sure enough, at the critical moment, Jiang Hai was scared again, and he coughed and said. In fact, he was right to think so. Azalina's strength was indeed strong, and he also needed a bodyguard now. A beautiful female bodyguard with a good figure by his side was also a very honorable thing for him. In that case, thank you, boss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also narrowed her eyes and smiled. She suddenly realized that this man who had defeated her seemed to be quite interesting. Originally, she thought that a man like Jiang Hai had no weaknesses, but now it seemed that the weakness was very obvious. You will be free in the future, but when I have to go out for something, you can follow me. You can arrange your time yourself. I will help you solve the problem of your identity. The weekly salary will be set at $2,000, and the year-end bonus will be calculated separately. Jiang Hai also looked for a bodyguard before, so he still had some understanding of the salary of a bodyguard. Chapter 415. Being a bodyguard could be considered the job with the least clear price tag in the world. The lowest was a few $1,000s a month, while the highest was $1 million a year. There was no clear price tag. However, Jiang Hai had thought about the problem of hiring bodyguards before, so he went to inquire about it. Nowadays, the top bodyguards in the country had an annual salary of almost $1 million. $2 million or $3 million would be his. And overseas, take Blackwater as an example. Different grades led to different prices. The lowest grade was a C-grade bodyguard, which meant that he had just come out of the Dolphin Special Forces, or the Triangle State. Anyone who had undergone basic training would know that Blackwater was made up of 9 parts. Blackwater Training Facility, Blackwater Target System, Blackwater Safety Consulting Company, Blackwater Dog Training Company, Blackwater Airship Company, Blackwater Armored Vehicle Company, Blackwater Maritime Company, Crow Development Group, Blackwater Airborne Division. Different types of training naturally led to different companies. The C-grade bodyguards had just come out of these training companies. Generally, such bodyguards would have an annual salary of about $50,000, but as long as they completed their tasks well, they could be promoted to B-grade. B-grade bodyguards could earn an average of $80,000 a year. Above them were A-grade bodyguards, which were basically the best bodyguards that could be hired, with an annual salary of about $150,000. Above A-grade were S-grade bodyguards, but there were only a few of them. They weren't bounty hunters. These S-grade bodyguards had been hired by the White House or some rich people for a long time, so their prices were naturally different. Jiang Hai's starting salary for Azalina was $100,000. There were a total of 52 weeks in a year, and $2,000 a week. That was more than $100,000 a year, not including the bonus. Including the year-end bonus, it was probably comparable to that of an A-grade bodyguard. Azalina was very satisfied with this annual salary. Of course, she didn't really care about the money. Compared to the money, she was more interested in the identity Jiang Hai gave her, and the benefits of living with Jiang Hai. For her, this was the most important thing. Since it had been decided, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He directly called Mayor Wallace and solved the household registration problem for Azalina. Azalina used to be a blank piece of paper. If she wanted to apply for immigration, it might be a little troublesome. However, Jiang Hai didn't want her to emigrate. It was just an employment contract, which was much simpler. Soon Mayor Wallace had finalized with Jiang Hai. Azalina was now a Panamanian working in the United States. In this way, the problem of household registration could be easily solved. After solving the biggest household registration problem, Azalina suddenly jumped into Jiang Hai's arms and gave Jiang Hai a kiss. Feeling the softness on his lips, Jiang Hai was stunned. "That's great, boss, I'm yours from now on." Looking at the somewhat stunned Jiang Hai, Azalina said with a smile, "Oh, okay. I will leave my safety to you in the future." Looking at the enthusiastic Azalina in front of him, Jiang Hai also said a little woodenly. Looking at him, Azalina chuckled and stood up from the sofa. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina smiled, then winked at Jiang Hai and said, "Since I am now the boss's person, I will help the boss solve his trouble." "Trouble? What trouble?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's heart thumped, and then his originally somewhat woodenly face became serious in an instant. It seems that this woman is not as silly and sweet as others. She seems to have no desire, but in fact this woman is not someone to be trifled with. "You understand, this is my proof of allegiance. Don't worry, I will not let you down." Looking at Jiang Hai's serious look, Azalina also smiled, and deliberately patted the pistol tied to her leg that she snatched from those people yesterday, and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. "Is she really reliable?" "Forget it, I will take care of these things. You just stay here obediently. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai still rejected her proposal. But Azalina smiled and waved at Jiang Hai. After saying see you tomorrow, she left Jiang Hai's villa. When Jiang Hai stood up and wanted to stop her, she had already run away. Looking at her back, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be speechless. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know what he was thinking. Although he wanted to stop her, he did have such an idea. Because even Jiang Hai didn't have the confidence to retreat under the threat of bullets, he didn't want her to die. But then again, if she can really help me solve the problem. So Jiang Hai was really in a dilemma. Just as he was in a dilemma, Azalina had already left his manor. I hope this matter can be settled. I came here to farm and raise fish. Why are there always so many old things? Seeing that Azalina had left, Jiang Hai also sighed helplessly. To be honest, in addition to the initial anger, Jiang Hai, who had calmed down now, really had a headache because he wasn't a person who liked to fight and kill. He didn't have much ambition for things like power and status. But these people who touched his bottom line, Jiang Hai wouldn't easily let them go. He just hoped that this time, he would make an example of them. And no one would dare to show off next time. But it was estimated that his hope would be difficult to achieve. In this world, there would always be people who wanted to take a bite of fat meat. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai sighed and went to the residential area of Aphrodite and the others. He was too anxious yesterday. Today he had to comfort these girls, especially Bernice and Littleya. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that these two would leave on the same day when they heard that Jiang Hai's manor was going to be attacked. But he didn't expect that these two didn't leave. Although they were almost scared to tears last night, they still held on strongly. Today Jiang Hai had to go and see them. Of course, in addition to them, Jiang Hai also had to comfort Delina, Marian and Aphrodite. When Jiang Hai appeared, these girls who seemed to be quite persistent couldn't help but cry. Even Bernice, who was usually cold and cheerless, was the same. Last night, she was really afraid that she would die like this. But fortunately, under the circumstances, nothing happened to her. But now that she saw Jiang Hai, she still felt wronged, and her tears flowed down. Besides her, the other girls were fine, especially Littleya, who was hiding in a dark room. When she saw Jiang Hai come in, she just hugged Jiang Hai. She didn't cry nor did she say anything. It can be seen that after many years of illness, she had become indifferent to life and death. It was inevitable that she would feel uncomfortable in her heart, but it was still within the scope of her endurance. Delina and the others were also very afraid of death, but they believed that Jiang Hai would come to save them, so they were fine. This time, it could be considered as surviving a disaster. After Jiang Hai comforted them, he specially organized a small party in Aphrodite's small villa. Of course, only Jiang Hai, Delina, Marian, Bernice, Littleya, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Ohilia, Bridget and Janice, a total of 15 people. It was indeed a bit crowded here, but they really needed to relax. Just as Jiang Hai and others were discussing surviving a disaster in the manor, Azalina had already gone to Boston, not far from Jiang Hai's manor. After she arrived there, she deliberately parked her car in the parking lot of the North Shore Garden Arena. Although there was no basketball game here today, there was no ice hockey game here. The North Shore Garden Arena was the home of two teams. In addition to the familiar Celtics, there was also the Boston Bruins, a team in the National Hockey League. Ice hockey, like basketball, began in November every year and ended in April of the next year. After the end of April, only the teams that entered the playoffs could play. This year's Bruins had no chance to enter the playoffs, but the Celtics had entered. But unfortunately, they lost to the popular Knights in the end. Now the Knights and Warriors were competing for the championship, and this place was empty. But although there was no game here, there would still be some tourists and people playing nearby who would come in to take a look. Azalina was the same. She took the money Jiang Hai gave her and specially bought a Celtics uniform. After stuffing some newspapers in it to change her body shape, she left from another door and took a taxi to the South District of Boston. Although nothing would happen to her even if she was seen, after all, she was Jiang Hai's employee. But years of experience made her do this. Indeed, if it came to these things, Belle was far from her opponent. When Jiang Hai and others were preparing dinner at home, gunshots were heard in the South District of Boston. But everyone didn't care too much about the gunshots. After all, where was this? The South District of Boston was a chaotic place. When someone found that someone had died, they began to call the police, but the murderer had already disappeared. On the same day, the 4 felons who were still detained in the Winthrop police station received the news that their family members were shot by unknown people. These people almost cried on the spot and swore to God that Jiang Hai did it. But the person in charge of monitoring Jiang Hai's manor said that except for Moses Adams, no one in Jiang Hai's manor had moved this year. The police didn't know about Azalina's existence. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai's villa came to an end, and he decided to stay at Belle's for the night. Belle also had 2 rooms, so it was naturally not a problem for Jiang Hai to stay there. When Jiang Hai, who was lying in bed, received a text message from Azalina, Jiang Hai smiled. Because there was a number 1 on it, Jiang Hai knew that there was only one goal left. Chapter 416. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. A flurry of footsteps sounded. In a small alley in Boston's South City, a group of people was running fast. The leader accidentally knocked over a trash can, and the people behind him fell down. When these people were covered with garbage and smelly water, these people didn't care. After rolling and crawling from the ground, they quickly ran to a corner next to them and looked behind them in horror. Boss, I can't run anymore. What should I do now? Looking at the person in the lead, a young man next to him was already tearing up. With a sobbing tone, he said to the first person who fell down just now with a pained expression, "You ask me what to do. How do I know what to do, Sha? Keep your voice down, don't attract that female devil." Patting the boy's head, the first person who fell couldn't help but say sharply, "If there was someone familiar with Billy Wallen here at this time, they may not recognize him." The person who spoke was not someone else, but Billy Wallen, who had a grudge against Jiang Hai. Now he was in a mess, which was completely different from the high-spirited person he was a few days ago. He now understood why the United States was said to be a paradise for the rich, because they really couldn't deal with the rich here. Originally, he thought that with thousands of underlings, he was invincible. As long as he didn't attack the United States government, he could beat up whoever he wanted. But obviously he thought too much. In the United States, you, a gang leader, want to find trouble with the rich? You are crazy. That night the revenge came. According to his informant, the backbones and underlings he sent last night were all arrested. The backbones were almost all dead. All the underlings were arrested. And the Boston police also began to seal the block he was in last night, and began to seal the bars, casinos, and the like he was responsible for, which made him feel bad. When he wanted to run, he found that all the blocks he was in were sealed, which made him feel even worse. He immediately changed his clothes and used the complicated alleys in Boston's South District to escape. Less than half an hour later, the police broke down the door because his underlings confessed, and then he was scared out of his wits. The entire Southern District was completely sealed off. Whether it was entry or exit, everything was under strict inspection. In every street and alley, the first thing that came out of everyone's mouth when they met was whether they had seen Billy. This scared Billy Wallen out of his wits. He never would have thought that he would end up with no path to heaven and no door to hell, just because of his little act. Originally, he thought that no matter how ruthless he was, he would still have a chance to escape like his former boss. But now, not to mention running away, he didn't even have the chance to get on a boat. He was sealed in the South City and couldn't get out at all. It seemed that the police would not give up until they caught him this time. Just as he was hiding like a mouse, preparing to endure for a period of time to see if there was a chance to leave, a woman entered South City. This woman was really strong. She actually found 5 of his hiding places in a row, and her methods were extremely ruthless. None of his underlings were left alive. Everyone who saw her was dead. Now only the few of them were left. There was only one of them. One of them was his assistant, and a few of the kids who had just joined them. Now these children were about to cry. They only saw the glory of these people before, But they didn't think about the danger they were in. Now that they knew the danger, it was too late. My foundation is gone just like that. He recalled that a day ago, he was still a rich man who had thousands of underlings and could leave at least a few $1,000,000 every month. How did he lose everything in just one day? His money was gone, and his life was probably going to be gone soon. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile. Life was short, and it was hard to say when it would be good and when it would be bad. Life was counted with one's fingers, and it was in the blink of an eye. Boss, it seems that we were cheated by those Huaxia people. This isn't a good deal, it's a life-threatening deal. Looking at Billy Wallen, his deputy said with a ruthless face. He had a lot of trust in Billy Wallen, because he was the one who helped Billy Wallen get his position as the boss. So at this time, he didn't blame his boss for provoking Jiang Hai. He only hated those people who led them to deal with Jiang Hai. They didn't think that if they didn't deal with Jiang Hai, where would they get the chance to develop? Huaxia people, yes, it's all because of those guys. Maybe this information can be exchanged for our lives. When he heard his subordinate's words, Billy Wallen's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said excitedly to his subordinate. Indeed, Jiang Hai only knew that he was dealing with him, but he probably didn't know that there were people behind him. Thinking of this, Billy Wallen couldn't help but get excited. Nothing was more exciting than grasping at straws. But just as he thought of this, a gunshot suddenly came from behind him. The deputy who was helping him analyze the situation just now looked in front of him with an incredulous expression, then fell into the dirty water on the ground. Wow, why didn't you run away? You made me kill another person. Looking at Billy Wallen and the others in front of her, a playful female voice came from the darkness, followed by Azalina's delicate figure slowly walking out of the darkness. At this time, Azalina's hair was scattered, and she was wearing a green Celtic uniform. But at this time, the uniform was covered with bloodstains. These bloodstains were not hers, but the bloodstains of the people she killed. The training she received from novels allowed her to kill people without any burden at all. Whether it was the elderly children, women, or even pregnant women, she would never hesitate to kill them. Not to mention Billy Wallen and the others. If Jiang Hai killed someone in this situation, he would probably have nightmares for many days, plus vomiting and diarrhea. It would take some time for him to get over it. As for Bell, although he was stronger than Jiang Hai, at least he did not have any psychological burden when killing Billy Wallen and the others. But he could not kill some innocent people. On the contrary, Azalina Vicarborio, a woman who had been killing people since she was 12 years old, did not escape from her original organization because she was tired of killing people like Bell. She escaped because she wanted to live. Of course, boredom was also one of the reasons. That was why she escaped. For her, as long as she completed the task, she did not care who she killed and how many she killed. Demon. Seeing Azalina coming out, the eyes of Billy Wallen and the others unconsciously widened. At this time, in their eyes, this female demon was simply the most abominable creature in the world. Thank you for the compliment, who's next? But unfortunately, their words did not make Azalina angry. She did not even have the slightest emotional fluctuation. She just stood there with a smile and mercilessly shot the head of the boy who was crying just now. She then glanced at the others. Wait, you can't kill me. Are you one of Jiang Hai's people? I have something that Jiang Hai wants to know. Seeing that the woman in front of him was looking at him, Billy Wallen yelled in horror like a frightened cat. He then stretched out his hand and gestured for Azalina to wait for a while, and then said quickly, "Don't worry. Sorry, I'm just responsible for killing people. The exchange of information has nothing to do with me." Hearing his words, Azalina shrugged and said to Billy Wallen with a helpless look, then raised her gun again. Wait a minute. Jiang Hai definitely wants to know this information. I'm not the one who wants to deal with him. I'm just a tool in the hands of others. His real enemy is not me, do you understand? Looking at Azalina in front of him, Billy Wallen said anxiously. Sure enough, when she heard that there was someone behind her, Azalina was stunned. In fact, not only Azalina, but Jiang Hai, Moses Adams, and even Murray Smith were also very curious. No matter how arrogant he was, How could a gray boss dare to provoke a rich man like Jiang Hai? Regardless of whether others believed it or not, they did not believe that Billy Wallen could achieve such a scale in half a year, which meant that he was definitely not a fool. However, he did blatantly attack Jiang Hai's manor, and Jiang Hai didn't know how he was going to end it. But as far as the current situation was concerned, he didn't have the ability to end it. At least, he didn't consider that the police would stand on Jiang Hai's side so firmly. He also didn't consider that Jiang Hai's firepower would be so strong that he could kill 46 of his men. Oh no, 45 of them. There was also a big guy who betrayed him. No one knew what happened. But in any case, it had happened, so he had to pay for what he did. It was that simple. After hearing his words, Azalina hesitated for a moment, but only for a moment. Then the pistol in her hand flashed continuously. When Billy Wallen thought he was dead, he heard a few gunshots, but he didn't feel any pain. When he opened his eyes again, he found that except for himself, all his men were dead. Since you want to sell information, then you have to see if your information is valuable in my master's eyes. Let's go. Azalina walked to Billy Wallen's side and pointed the gun at his hand. At the same time, she took out a mobile phone with her other hand. This was given to her by Jiang Hai when she left. She pressed the only number on the phone and sent a message to Jiang Hai. After a while, she received a reply. Chapter 417. Wah wah! The sound of waves hitting the side of the boat, and the shore could be heard. On the endless sea, a small boat was constantly rolling along with the waves. At this time, two people were sitting on the boat. One of them was none other than Azalina Vicabrio, and the other was Billy Wallen. But at this time, Billy Wallen was as embarrassed as he could be. This guy was now covered with wounds all over his body. His face was blue and purple, and his right little finger was missing. It was wrapped with a piece of gauze that didn't look very clean. His two thumbs were tightly tied together by a plastic band used by people who usually assemble computers. His thumb was already purple from necrosis, but he didn't care, and the person opposite him didn't care either. I don't understand. Why are you working for a yellow-skinned monkey? As long as you are willing to let me go, I can get you as much money as you want. Looking at Azalina Vicabrio, who was enjoying the sea breeze in front of him, Billy Wallen said with a serious look. Hearing his words, Azalina chuckled softly. She didn't care about this guy's provocative words. After glancing at the man with her beautiful eyes, she looked into the distance. Looking at her appearance, Billy Wallen couldn't help but sigh. It seems that he thought too little. Billy Wallen was caught last night, and he had been in the hands of this woman for a day and half of the night. Of course, he had been tortured for the past 24 hours. When he said that he was not behind the scenes, Azalina immediately reported it to Jiang Hai. But then she didn't stop. She continued to beat him. In her opinion, if she can get information out of him, then she doesn't need to trouble Jiang Hai too much. She can deal with it. But the problem now is that this man knows very well that if he doesn't see Jiang Hai, then he will really die. So even if his little finger was cut off, he didn't say a word. Azalina persisted until this afternoon. Seeing that he really didn't want to say anything, she reported it to Jiang Hai. Secondly, Jiang Hai asked her to buy a boat and drive it to his sea area at night to meet him here. Time passed by minute. At about 11 o'clock in the evening, the sound of an engine suddenly sounded in this silent world. Hearing this sound, Azalina stood up first and looked into the distance. Then he saw Jiang Hai driving a boat from his manor. According to the signal, after shaking the headlights, he slowly approached. With the help of the moonlight, he also saw the person on the boat in front of him. Is he still not going to say it? Azalina stood up. Jiang Hai asked her. He's so stubborn. Squinting her eyes, Azalina said with a smile on her face. But from her smile, it could be seen that she was not very satisfied with her approach. She was the first one to do a mission, and she didn't even complete it 100%. It was indeed a bit unsightly, but looking at Jiang Hai's expression, she could tell that he was quite satisfied with the completion of this mission. Well, don't worry about it. Patting Azalina on the shoulder, Jiang Hai walked to the boat, squatted down, and looked at Billy Wallen in front of him. Jiang Hai looked at him carefully. It's this guy who almost forced me into a desperate situation twice in a row. Hello, my name is Jiang Hai. If you have something to say, just say it. At this time, looking at this embarrassed guy, Jiang Hai's anger subsided a little. At least he can talk to him quietly. Looking at the white man in front of him, Jiang Hai said indifferently, If I say it, can you save my life? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen raised his head and said with a firm look on his face, If I'm interested in what you say, I promise not to kill you. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled, but it doesn't matter. Jiang Hai spread his hands and said calmly to Billy Wallen, Don't just talk about you, there's also her. At this time, Billy Warren could only believe in Jiang Hai's oath. However, he was still careful enough. He looked at Azalina behind Jiang Hai and said those words. Even if Jiang Hai fell out with him, he wouldn't be able to do anything. She won't either, just say it. Glancing at Azalina behind him, Jiang Hai said calmly, I hope you'll keep your promise. It wasn't my intention to cause trouble for you. No matter how stupid I am, I wouldn't cause trouble for a rich man like you. The reason why I've been keeping an eye on you is because the person behind me wants to cause trouble for you. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Billy Wallen took himself out of the conversation. He really knows how to talk. That's not what I want to hear. Who is the person behind you? Glancing at Billy Wallen indifferently, Jiang Hai said impatiently. He didn't come to listen to Billy Wallen's story. If he talks nonsense again, he will kill him. I don't know who it is, but the person who contacted me is a group of Huaxia people. They call the boss behind them Young Master. They are very rich, and they should have some power in Huaxia. Originally, they just wanted your life, but then they wanted your cow. Seeing the impatience in Jiang Hai's eyes, Billy Wallen said anxiously, Huaxia people? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. What's going on? Yes, Huaxia people. I'm very sure. Before I came to Boston, I hung out with the Chinese Gray Gang in New York for a while. Although their accent is a little different, most of them are similar. They don't know that I can understand Chinese, and they called in front of me. They called the person on the other side of the phone as Young Master. Their Young Master seems to live in the capital. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen said everything he could to save his life. His face was filled with nervousness. It was very scary. Did they say what their boss was called, and what the boss of that group was called? Looking at Billy Wallen in front of him, Jiang Hai said seriously. To be honest, when he heard what he said, the first enemy he thought of was Qin Fun's father, Qin Tian. But if it was this guy, the timing didn't seem to match. After all, it was really a long time ago when Billy Wallen first attacked him. At that time he didn't know Qin Fun. Moreover, after Qin Fun died, Qin Tian followed him not long after. They didn't have the time to commit the crime. Since it was not the Qin family, to be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't know if he had any enemies in China who wanted to kill him. I don't know who their boss is. I only know that they call their boss Young Master. As for the name of that group of people, I only know the leader. When we first met, he said that his name was Rui Jiang. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen immediately said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Rui Jiang? Jiang Rui. Americans are troublesome, what else do you know? Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen shook his head helplessly. I only know that they had been living in the XX Hotel in Boston before this. But on the first day of my accident, they had already run away. I called them for help, but at that time, they had already boarded the plane. Looking at Jiang Hai, Billy Wallen said seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at Azalina. It was difficult for Jiang Hai to tell whether this person was telling the truth or not. But Azalina had no problem. He is telling the truth. It seems that he only knows so much. Do you want to? Azalina saw Jiang Hai's gaze and chuckled. After she finished speaking, she made a throat-slitting gesture. You said that you would let me go. Please, I just want to live, please. Hearing Azalina's words, Billy Wallen couldn't help but say excitedly. After such a big thing, the only thing he has to do is to live. He doesn't want to die. Don't worry, I'm very interested in what you said, so I won't kill you. Of course she won't either. But I won't leave this ship here. If you are lucky, swim back. I promise I won't trouble you again. Looking at Billy Wallen, who was scared out of his wits, Jiang Hai smiled faintly, then pulled him up and threw him into the sea. Although his hands were still covered, Billy Wallen grew up by the sea after all. He was a good swimmer. After entering the water, he didn't sink, but swam vigorously. Although his physical strength was almost gone now, his willpower to live was stronger than anything else. As long as he was still alive, he had the hope of making a comeback. He must return the humiliation he suffered today in the future. Are you really going to let him go? Looking at Billy Wallen, who swam away quickly after falling into the water, Azalina couldn't help but frown. This Billy Wallen is different from ordinary enemies. If you cut the weeds without removing the roots, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Go? Haha, can he really go? Jiang Hai smiled and returned to his ship. He took out a barrel of gasoline and slowly poured it on the ship. When the gasoline was poured, Jiang Hai also returned to his boat with Azalina. Then, a Zippo lighter slowly lit up and was thrown onto the ship by Jiang Hai. Bang! In an instant, the entire ship was set ablaze, and under the blazing flames, a black figure rushed straight towards Billy Wallen, who was swimming on the surface of the sea. Bang! When Jiang Hai's ship sailed away from this sea area, the burning ship also exploded with a bang. Billy Wallen, who swam a few hundred meters away, only felt a huge force. Then he flew into the air in an instant. The last thing he saw was a bloody mouth biting his lower body. After a sharp pain, everything returned to normal. The browser crashed. Now it's so laggy that it vomits blood. I need to redo it after changing it. Chapter 418. This person named Jiang Rui does have a record of entering and exiting the country. The last video was the day before yesterday, which is the day after the incident here. But on the surface, this guy is just a tourist. There is no record to check. While looking at the record of this person named Jiang Rui, Jiang Hai listened to Moses Adams. Today was the third day after Jiang Hai was attacked. On the first day, he was in the police station. On the second day, he didn't know how the news spread. On the same day, a lot of people came to his manor. Zhang Dihai and the others came to visit Jiang Hai. Selena Gomez and Prawalton both called to come over, but they were stopped by Jiang Hai. Are you kidding me? Now when he sees Selena Gomez and Prawalton, he will still feel awkward. As for other partners such as Iron Bull Aniva, who sold Jiang Hai's fish seedlings, and Baker Gerard from the research lab, they all called. There were also some who wanted to visit Jiang Hai, but they were all stopped by him. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai did not know that he already had so many friends. In the evening, he went to see Billy Wallen. After returning home that night, he called Moses Adams and prepared to investigate the mastermind behind the scenes. But to be honest, the information about the person behind the scenes was not very good. Because on the surface, this Jiang Rui used to be a soldier in China. He was born in 1973 and became a soldier in 1991. After retiring in 2004, he disappeared for a period of time. It was said that he went to the Middle East to be a mercenary. He returned to China in 2010, and then there was completely no news about him. Until this year, he came to the United States as a tourist. No one knew what he was doing. Only Jiang Hai knew that this guy was here to deal with him. Are you sure this guy is behind the scenes? Moses Adams asked with some doubts as he looked at the family photo. To be honest, it was not difficult to get the information, but he found it hard to believe Jiang Hai's judgment. He shouldn't be the mastermind behind the scenes, but just another knife. Forget it, let's not talk about it. I'll ask around, how is my case going recently? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai looked at Moses Adams and asked. Jiang Hai now had 2 vicious dogs under his command. One of them was Azalina. There's no problem. The witnesses and material evidence are all here. Those who attacked the manor will definitely go in. Those who blocked the way will probably also be arrested, but they won't be sentenced for too long. But for us, as long as we go in, we can take action. After this incident, Jiang Hai's trust in this woman instantly increased from 0 to 80. This has reached the point where Jiang Hai does not doubt the people he uses. And this woman is also worth this line, as far as the current situation is concerned. The second vicious dog is Moses Adams. This man is very much in line with Jiang Hai's mind, and he is getting more and more in line with him. He knows when he should do what, and he also knows how to share Jiang Hai's worries. Compared to these, the thing he wanted was money, which Jiang Hai did not lack the least. In fact, in the United States, as long as you have money, you have everything. Jiang Hai has plenty of money, so Moses Adams is quite loyal. Of course, he can't access Jiang Hai's core secrets, which is inevitable, but Jiang Hai is still very calm when he is asked to help clean up and solve some people who can be solved with money. Because this incident is relatively big, it may cost a lot. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams closed the report in his hand, shrugged at Jiang Hai, and said helplessly. But as soon as his voice fell, Jiang Hai had already picked up his phone and started to operate it. In less than a minute, a text message came on his phone, indicating that $20 million had been transferred to his bank account. The rest is yours. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams's eyes lit up. He likes this kind of generous boss the most. Jiang Hai is really good with money. At least he has never let him down. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also stood up and said respectfully, "Yes, boss, I know what to do." Then, after reporting the situation in the past few days, he took the initiative to leave. After he left, Jiang Hai also took out his cell phone and called Chili. This person named Jiang Rui is indeed a little troublesome for Jiang Hai to investigate. But if he let Chili wake him up, there may be unexpected gains. So after thinking about it, he called her. "Hello, why are you calling me?" The phone rang less than 3 times before it was picked up, and Chili's excited voice came from the other side of the phone. She should be at home now, and there is the sound of TV next to her. "Are you at home?" It is now 8 o'clock in the morning in Jiang Hai's place, so it is 9 o'clock in the evening in China. 13 hours earlier, it is Huaxia's time now. "Yeah, I'm watching TV." Listening to Jiang Hai's voice on the phone, Chili, who had just taken a shower at home and was watching TV, said with a smile. In recent days, she has been in a very good mood. The beef imported from Jiang Hai has become the main brand of her restaurant, as she expected. The best beef in the world. She really wasn't wrong to call it that. Even if it was the best beef in Japan, it might not be as good as Jiang Hai's. She didn't feel any burden to call it that now. Since ancient times, Huaxia has liked to be the middle, and people like to compete for the first place in everything. The world's best beef. Once this brand was out, it naturally attracted a large number of people's attention. After eating it once, they indeed felt that it was delicious. Of course, more people were just following the crowd. How many people could really tell whether the beef was good or bad? In China, there are basically only 4 kinds of beef. Beef brisket is stewed, beef shank is sauced, beef is fried and roasted, and beef offal is boiled. That's all. Not many people know about marbling and meat. This time, after Chi Li's explanation, more and more people know about it. Of course, knowing it costs money. A 7.5-ounce Jiang Hai's high-quality steak, about 4.7 pounds, is sold here for 1,488 yuan. You can choose a chef to cook it in front of you on the spot. You can also choose to serve it after it is done. 2 yuan, 1 pound is nearly 3,000 yuan. Of course, the price is RMB. The raw material price of Jiang Hai's beef is more than 2,400 yuan per pound. There is also the cost of labor, restaurant, water, electricity, tax, and some tributes. Selling it at this price is really not a lot of profit. But this kind of price, this kind of service, this kind of beef, the 3 flavors in one, instantly occupies the top consumer market in Imperial City. During this period of time, all the food and beverage companies chose to avoid anything related to the Qi family's beef for the time being. Some American consortiums saw the business opportunity here, so they wanted to buy it in the United States. However, they found that the Shanghai supermarkets and Walmart Group also have this kind of beef. When they asked about the price, they gave up. The wholesale price of this kind of beef was $420, per pound by the sea merchants, and $418 per pound by Walmart. $418 was equivalent to 2,700 renminbi, including the transportation to China, the rental of the store, the payment of the tribute, the water and electricity, and the rental of the staff. They would lose money if they couldn't sell it for 3,800 renminbi per pound. However, Chile only sold it for 2,976 renminbi. Naturally, they couldn't compete. In this way, the high-end market for this kind of beef quickly closed. Now the rich people in Imperial City come to eat it almost every day. And the rich people who come to Imperial City from other places have to ask someone to make an appointment if they want to eat a piece of beef. Models, actors, and other people who eat this kind of beef have to post it on Weibo to attract attention. The sky-high price of this kind of beef is also very popular on the internet. Even the media is involved, but there is nothing they can do, because this kind of beef is traceable. It is not like the sky-high price of prawns or shredded potatoes, which use ordinary ingredients to cheat others. This kind of beef is the best kind of beef in the world. The price is right there, and it is destined that ordinary people can't afford it. Therefore, when the media saw that they can't cheat, they changed the topic and changed it to praise. So Chile has been living very comfortably these days. In the past, when Chi Group was at its peak, not many people paid attention to it. But now it is different. In just a few days, Chi Group's share price has increased by 20%. Some of the directors, who had some complaints at first, all shut up. This made Chile really happy these days. Now that she heard Jiang Hai's words, she started to talk to Jiang Hai. It's fine as long as the beef is good. Please help me investigate a person called Jiang Rui. I will send you his information later. Listening to Chile talking about the beef on the phone, Jiang Hai wiped his sweat. He naturally knows that the beef is good, but he didn't call to share the news with Chile. He has something to ask Chile to investigate. Jiang Rui. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chile asked with some doubts. She is not familiar with this name. Yes, he is called Jiang Rui. He used to be a soldier and a mercenary. This time, he came to the United States to do something. He said that there is a big boss in the country, so I want to find out who he is. Hearing Chile's words, Jiang Hai said indifferently. Although Jiang Hai said it casually, Chile knew that there must be something behind it. Her face instantly became serious. Okay, I got it. Give me a day. I will definitely find out. Then it's a deal. Hearing Chile's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He knew that with the Chi family's many years of connections in the country, it wouldn't be troublesome to find a person. Especially if they wanted to know who was behind this person. It would definitely not be troublesome. After hanging up the phone, Jiang Hai let out a long breath. This time, since he wants to pull out the nail, he will pull it out completely. Chapter 419. Director Chi. Hello, Director Chi. Good morning, Director Chi. Chile strode confidently in her high heels and walked quickly into the Chi Group building. Everyone who saw her bowed their heads respectfully and greeted her as Director Chi. However, what surprised them was that Director Chi, who usually had a cold face like an iceberg, seemed to have a good heart today. When they greeted her, she would respond with a smile. She even nodded when she saw some familiar faces, which made them feel flattered. Ever since Chile took over the company, her face had always been in a state of deep sorrow. Not to mention nodding and smiling. When she saw someone greet her while walking, she would not even squint her eyes. When she wanted to take the elevator, except for her personal secretary, no one was allowed to accompany her. Of course, she also had a separate elevator, which only stopped at 2 places, the first floor and the floor of her office, and this elevator was also not allowed to be used by others. If she was a woman in her 40s who was so cold every day, she would probably be called the cruel spinster behind her back. However, Chile was very beautiful and young. She was not even 30 years old, so no one called her the cruel spinster behind her back. Instead, they called her the Scarlet Serpent Fairy. Of course, this was also related to her previous life. However, today, the people in the company felt that their eyes were going blind. The Scarlet Serpent Fairy actually smiled. She actually smiled. The sun must have risen from the west. Many people who saw this muttered in their hearts. Could it be that she was so happy because the Chi Group's restaurant business was doing well recently? Or was it because she liked them? Of course, most people who thought this way were idiots and overly narcissistic. After all, this was also the first of the 3 biggest misconceptions in life. Director Chi is in a good mood today. After coming to her office, Chi Li's assistant, who had been following Chi Li all the time, didn't have a name until now. Looking at Chi Li, her assistant asked happily. Yes, let me tell you. Jiang Hai called me yesterday. After hearing her assistant's words, Chi Li sat down in her seat and fiddled with the documents on her desk while speaking mysteriously to her assistant. Hearing Chi Li's words, the assistant couldn't help but be at a loss for words. It seemed that she used to look down on Jiang Hai the most. When Jiang Hai called her, she almost wouldn't pick up. It was because of her attitude that this assistant dared to be so cocky to Jiang Hai. When did Jiang Hai's phone call have such a magical effect? Looking at Chi Li, who seemed to be immersed in happiness, the assistant couldn't help but sigh. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? By the way, what about the person I asked you to investigate last night? However, Chi Li didn't care about her assistant's thoughts. After she finished packing, she immediately asked her assistant. As the saying goes, the boss moves his mouth, and the subordinate runs his legs. Yesterday, Jiang Hai asked her to investigate the person named Jiang Rui. After receiving the information, Chi Li immediately asked her assistant to start investigating. The first thing she asked at work today was to ask about this. I've already found the information. Just as Jiang Hai thought, the Chi family had worked hard here for so many years, so it was not a problem to get some information. After the assistant finished speaking, she handed the information in her hand to Chi Li. After Chi Li took it, she looked at it. Compared with the information found by Jiang Hai, Chi Li's investigation was obviously more detailed. This Jiang Rui was born in 1973. When he was 18 years old in 1991, because he injured someone, in order to escape the police's pursuit, he spent money to enter the army. He worked in the local army, the permanent army, the border defense force, and the Ace Division. Because he was extremely tough and brave, and he really didn't want to learn, the highest rank he could reach was a sergeant. In 2004, because he hit his boss, he was expelled from the army. Then he entered the Middle East, joined a French mercenary group there, participated in the US-Iraq War, and also went to Afghanistan for a permanent residence. 10 years later, he returned to China. His current job showed that he didn't have a job, but it seemed that he did some private work for others. Chi Li was familiar with these people, because the Chi family also had them. And these people were not assassinating their opponents. In Huaxia, it was important to leave people a way out, so that they could meet each other in the future. Therefore, no one would touch the bottom line. However, if the other party were to play dirty, for example, finding a group of people to sit in front of your company or restaurant and not enter, they would just sit there and drink, throwing large beer bottles on the ground. Naturally, no one would dare to go in and eat. At this time, these people would be responsible for driving people away, or doing the same thing for the other party. It seemed that this Jiang Rui was such a person. According to Chi Li's investigation, this person's background seemed to be the Yin family. The Yin family? Looking at the information, Chi Li frowned. This person was related to the Yin family? Yes, we found out that in 1991, the person who helped Jiang Rui escape capture was Andrew Sun's father, and Zheng Jun, so behind him, there is a high possibility that the Yin family is behind him. Also, I recently found some information. This guy just returned from the United States a few days ago. And the most recent news from the United States is that a group of Grey Gang attacked Jiang Hai's manor. But we don't know the specific situation, only that they used guns. Looking at Chi Li in front of her, her assistant also said, "What? Jiang Hai's manor?" Hearing this, Chi Li was instantly shocked. She immediately picked up the phone and called Jiang Hai. At this time, Jiang Hai had just finished showering, and was preparing to sleep in another room in Belle's house. There was no other way. The police hadn't removed the lockdown yet, so Jiang Hai could only go in to take some personal things. If he wanted to remove the lockdown, he would have to wait until the court hearing, which was 15 days. But after 15 days, the lockdown would be lifted, and Jiang Hai would have to renovate it. After all, he didn't have the habit of living in a bullet hole house. Hello. Seeing the phone ring, Jiang Hai picked it up. But just as he picked it up, he heard Qi Li's voice like a firecracker. Listening to her voice, Jiang Hai was confused. You had a shooting there? Are you okay? Are you hurt? I said that the US is too dangerous. Why don't you go back to China? Hey, can you hear me? How come there is no sound after you say hello? Listening to Qi Li's words on the phone, to be honest, Jiang Hai was a little tangled, because he didn't know what to say. I'm fine and I'm not hurt. I've solved the matter in the US, but I found out that these people may have been instructed by some people in China to attack me. So I want to know who those people in China are. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai said faintly, This is a big deal for Jiang Hai. China? The Jiang Rui you asked me to investigate is the mastermind behind the scenes? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but be stunned. No, he is just one of the informants. The mastermind behind the scenes is his family's young master. I don't know who it is, so I asked you to help. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also said slowly, And Jiang Wu, you bastard, I must kill you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's good mood instantly turned bad. She has found out that this Jiang Rui is related to the Yin family. The Yin family's young master is either in Zhangyong or in Zhangwu. No matter who it is, Qi Li can't wait to tear them apart. And Zhangwu? The one you saw during the New Year? Your first boyfriend? Hearing in Zhangwu's name, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. Then he remembered the identity of this person, and he couldn't help but be speechless for a while. What first boyfriend? That is my enemy who killed my father. Nothing happened between me and him. We didn't even kiss. Really, I swear. Hearing Jiang Hai's slightly joking voice say the words first boyfriend, Qi Li panicked instantly and immediately said on the phone. Hearing her explanation, Jiang Hai didn't know what to feel. After all, the two were still married on the surface. This state sigh, it's really hard to say. But after hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai's heart must be a little uncomfortable. No matter what made Jiang Hai so unhappy, then Jiang Hai will kill him. At the same time, because of Qi Li, Jiang Hai also hated her a little. After pondering for a while, Jiang Hai said to Qi Li on the phone, Whether there is anything else between you and him, to be honest, it has nothing to do with me. But if you still have him in your heart, then I may be sorry to you. By the way, please tell him that he may be out of luck, because I am going to go back and kill him. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he hung up the phone directly. As for Qi Li, she sat in the boss's chair with a face full of confusion. Looking at the hung-up phone, she suddenly wanted to cry, but she didn't know how to cry. It seemed that because of her, Jiang Hai was implicated again. Looking at the phone screen, Qi Li immediately called, but unfortunately, the phone was disconnected at this time. She called several times in a row, but it didn't get through. She called again and again, it couldn't get through. She knew that this meant that she was also blacklisted by Jiang Hai. Seeing this, she was even more panicked. She panicked, not because Jiang Hai said that he would come back to kill in Zhangwu. Even she wanted to kill him, but because this guy who should have died made the atmosphere between her and Jiang Hai, which had just picked up a little bit, fall below the freezing point again. Quick, check the flights from the United States to the capital immediately. See which flight has Jiang Hai's name in the first-class cabin. Quick! After hanging up the phone, Qi Li immediately shouted to the assistant, who was also a little confused. She was really a little panicked. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.